Okay, looks like we're recording, so I'll get started. My name is James Pepper, Chair of the Cannabis Control Board. Today is Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. It's 1:03 p.m. and I call this meeting to order. A lot on the agenda today. Before we get started, I did want to briefly amend the agenda. I would like, just given the kind of number of policy-related issues that we have on the agenda towards the end, I would like to add one additional public comment period right before we adjourn. And I think that maybe we can hold off on making any decisions after we can discuss, but hold off on making decisions and then get one last public comment period in before we take any action on the discussion points. That's all right?
Sure.
Okay. Adding a public comment period after that discussion of LCC guidance agenda item. Anything else to amend the agenda?
For me.
No? Okay. So just a few opening remarks. Want to note that the next enhanced bud tender education class for employees of medical use endorsed retailers will be on February 26th, not including the one tomorrow, but the next one that's available for sign up is February 26th at 9 a.m. The first two of these trainings were exclusive to the active medical use endorsed employees. This one will be open to the general universe of employee ID card holders. But again, we're going to prioritize any employees of the medical use endorsed licensees, either active or in the pipeline. Space is limited, and you can sign up for that February class at ccb.vermont.gov/training sign up. And just so everyone's aware, we are working on making these trainings and the certification exam available on demand. There are a few details that need to be worked out before we can do that, but we will certainly update our website and let the public know once those are available on demand. Only other thing is we need to approve our meeting minutes from our regular board meeting on December 17th. On our evidentiary hearing on January 14th. And we actually, Patrick did the affiliations hearing from earlier this morning.
Oh, wow.
Julie, you weren't at the 17th. Do you want to recuse from that, or you've probably had a chance to review the transcript?
I have reviewed the transcript. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So I could vote on the content of the
Great.
meeting, I guess.
All right. So is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next public comment, just handle this the same way you always do. If you join via the link and would like to make a public comment, raise your virtual hand. We'll do our best to call you in the order that you raise your hand and then move to anyone who joined by phone. Okay, and if you join via phone and would like to comment, you can unmute by hitting *6. Okay. I will close the public comment window and move right down the agenda. Most people that have been following our work know that one of the first things that we did was get a analysis of the supply or the demand for cannabis in Vermont. And we use that to help inform a lot of decisions around what the market structure should be and the number of licenses that we should issue. We were kind of told that we should update that periodically, just to make sure we're making data-informed decisions. And one thing that we did last year was contract with Cannabis Public Policy and Consulting to just update our demand analysis. And we added some few other issues in there, some scenario planning. If, certain policies were to change at the state or federal level, what would that mean to our demand for cannabis? What would that mean for licensing decisions? And they've been, doggedly collecting data from all various sources and analyzing it, and are here with us today to give a preliminary report, which will be followed by a more formal report in writing later. But I think I saw Mackenzie join. Mackenzie, did I do that justice?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much for the table setting.
Well, if you're ready to get going, I know you sent over some preliminary findings to the board members, but this is our first opportunity to kind of dig in with you about them and to just see what you've come up with and see if there's any lingering questions from the board or directions that we'd like to just further explore with you.
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. For those who my face might be familiar to, my name is Mackenzie Slade. I'm the CEO of Cannabis Public Policy Consulting. I'm also an implementation scientist. I am not the principal investigator of this work. Our colleague, Gideon Cunningham, is on and should be able. Gideon, are you able to come off mute and camera?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for you, but if you want to make your introduction before we jump in, you are welcome to.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here and thank you for listening to me. My name is Gideon Cunningham. I am the Director of Research at Cannabis Public Policy Consulting. I'm also a PhD candidate in public policy. Unsurprisingly, I specialize in a whole range of topics regarding cannabis policy, anything from public health to public opinion to the economics of cannabis. And I've been fortunate enough to do applied cannabis policy work in about a dozen states now. Yeah, but I think we can get started. Okay. All right. So as was mentioned, this is just a preliminary abridged report of our full report that we will have coming out later in writing. It will focus specifically on some of the findings we have from our state-based survey. So as was mentioned, we collect from a variety of data sources, and this is specific to the actual survey that we conduct. So we have a name for our survey. It's called the Regulatory Determinants of Cannabis Outcome Survey, or RDCOS for short. And we've deployed this nationally many times, and then in each individual state that I've worked in at least once or twice. So this survey that we ran for Vermont ran from October to, I believe, the end of October to the middle of November. So it was about a 2 to 3 week window. And we used the Scent online community panels. It can either be called the Lucid Marketplace or just Scent broadly speaking. And it's convenience-based recruitment. And what that means is that generally a survey will be sent out to people and asked if they would like to participate, or they'll see it on a board somewhere, and then they will enter that survey and answer a couple questions to see if they qualify for that survey. So for this specific survey, we actually asked only 2 questions to get in. It's whether or not you were 18 years or older, and if you were from Vermont. And it will help to kind of go into the process on how we get to our final sample when I go over the rest of this methodology to understand how we get to our final sample. But from the top, we have about 263 complete observations. And like I said, the first step is that these people answer questions on how to get into the survey, and they're asked that multiple times on different websites. So if I say I'm 18, this answer has to be consistent for if I'm 18 in another part of the survey. They also answer 4 different attention checks. So you do have to pass those attention checks to stay within the total number of completes in the survey. You also have to answer that you're actually from the state multiple times. So we make sure that to keep people that are only within the state. And then we also use Qualtrics as our survey platform, and they have a whole variety of really good fraud detection tools to make sure that individuals aren't abusing the system and answering questions or surveys multiple different times. So that's just some of the steps that we go about ensuring the accuracy of this. We also design it in a way to be representative, or at least approximate representation of past month cannabis consumers in Vermont. And this is an important point. It's not the results that are here are designed to mimic what we would expect in the population of just past month cannabis consumers in Vermont. So it's not the entire population or past year consumers. It's specifically for past month cannabis consumers. And the process that we go about obtaining more representative statistics in this is essentially two different processes. So there's two national samples conducted yearly, BRFIS, or I believe it's called the Behavioral Risk Factor. Kinsey, correct me if I'm wrong. It's conducted by the CDC. Yes, and generally speaking, that is done by states in conjunction with the CDC. And then there's NISDA, which is by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration. And so they use two different sampling techniques. One is address-based sampling, and the other is phone calls. And essentially, what we do is we pull the proportions for a whole number of variables and get the distributions and match those up with our population. We do this through a process called raking. So essentially, we want to use the national probability samples to inform our non-probability samples. So we look at the percentage of people that are like 18 to 21, 21 to 29, and so on. And then we do the same thing for counties, racial and ethnic distribution, gender, and the number of days that people have used cannabis within the past month, which is very important. So raking essentially tries to find a weight to give to each observation across all these numbers of variables. And then we use the NISDA population estimates. The most recent ones, I believe, are 2023, to give a whole total population for those weights. And very technical, but it is important to increase the accuracy of the results. And then we have another process called inverse probability weighting, which is essentially just modeling the difference between probability samples and non-probability samples, and this will give us our final weights. And as you can see at the bottom, the whole idea behind this is to provide a cost-effective, statistically adjusted sample, and it is specifically for past month cannabis consumers. And you can go to the, yeah, go ahead.
Could I ask you to explain also, I know where we are, the population of interest is past month cannabis users, but could you explain how NISDA and BRFIS collect throughout the years to be able to make sure that folks who have consumed within the year are incorporated?
Yeah, so people will receive the survey only once. So this could be either through address-based sampling or through random digit dialing, I believe is what it's called. And that's for BRFIS, and the address-based sampling is for NISDA. But say that you were a past month cannabis consumer, but you only used once a year. You would still put, yes, I've used within the past month, but that may be the only month that you have used within the past year. So we focus specifically on the past month because we want to try to capture those people to make projections about that month on how people are spending their money towards cannabis products and what units they're obtaining. So that's why we focus on that specifically. There's other academics that use different methodologies, but that is the idea for why we focus specifically on past month consumers, is trying to capture, okay, maybe we'll get some people from the past year, but we should collect them within our past month demographics.
Gideon, I got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Are you okay to take questions like as we go?
Yeah, please. I would be happy to answer.
Yeah, so I know that there was some data nationwide about COVID and stay home, stay safe skewing usage rates. Do we feel like 2023 is sufficiently beyond, as far as the BRFIS and NISDA data, beyond that COVID, the pandemic, inflation, or whatever else to give accurate results?
So I do know what literature you're talking about, and I believe, and I don't know this for 100% fact, but I believe the skewing adjustments were applied only for 2021 and 2022. Okay. I would have to go back and check to make sure if it applies for 2023 or not. So I can't give a definitive answer, but I would presume, unless NISDA makes the explicit, and they generally have a whole bunch of documentation about how they go about designing their surveys and how they adjust it statistically. Unless they were to make it explicit, we should be under the assumption that would be normal conditions or post-COVID conditions. But I would have to actually go and check that to give a definitive answer.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Is there any other questions?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. So I just want to lay out a few brief limitations about this. This is a sample. It's a survey, so you can expect some uncertainty in the results. Each sample will have its own uncertainty and confidence intervals. But generally speaking, what we try to do to avoid that is we check the supply chain data. So this is normally a track and trace system in the state to check the amount that is listed for how much was sold across the state. And generally speaking, we have access to medical sales, adult use sales, or some combination of the two. So we can check in the past month, does our survey accurately represent what is being spent within the state? For this specific survey, we do not have access to medical sales, and that's common in other states. So we can only make an approximation about how close our survey is. But generally speaking, if we can get our estimates within the confidence intervals, it will provide some sort of certainty to being more confident about the representation of the population. And as I was saying earlier, this is just designed to be past month cannabis consuming population. So if you were to look at this in the sales data, it would likely be that you would be looking at October, would be the main one of concern. We do collect during November, but it is on past month consumption, so it would largely run into the October sales. I think you can go to the next one, Kens. So this is our estimate for the regulated market. As I was saying, we collect data on patient spending and non-patient spending, but we have no way to cross-validate the patient spending. But our estimates would say that depending on what you use for the population size, it should be somewhere between 12 million at our lowest confidence interval and 21 million. And that the reason for that is that we and NISDA specifically are both uncertain about the estimates and uncertain about the total target population size. So if you can imagine in a medical population state where there is a census done on the total number of medical patients in that month, you have a really definitive answer on the total number of people that can participate in the market, or at least roughly with the exact estimate. For NISDA specifically, they have to provide estimates with confidence intervals in their yearly state-based estimates. And so they give you a lower and upper bound on the total target population that you have within the state, so past month cannabis consumers. And so I provided the estimate that we have and then combined it with their lower bounds and their upper bounds. I tend to prefer the lower bound estimate for making just a conservative estimate of market size. So you would look at the second row at that $16 million mark would be what I would expect from our survey, is saying this amount of money is being spent in the market in the month that we surveyed. So about $16,700,000.
And just to be clear about what you just said there, that does include medical sales. So even though they're not taxable sales for the metrics that our Department of Taxes collects, that is cannabis spending in the market.
Yes, correct.
Per month?
Yes.
Per month.
And this is specific to the month that they surveyed, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say per month with the addition that cannabis spending is very seasonal. So depending on when we do this survey, it could skew up or down depending on what the seasonality is or the time of year, essentially. In some states, and I would assume Vermont as well, some of the traceable sales will include higher than normal monthly sales if there is a lot of tourism during that season. So if we collect this survey during a certain time of year and there's a lot of tourists that are there currently purchasing from the regulated market and included in taxable sales, our number would be on the lower end side because we are just looking at Vermont consumers rather than people traveling to Vermont to consume cannabis. And I think you can go to the next slide, Kens, if no one has any questions. So this is what we actually pulled from Vermont's tax website, I believe, the taxation and revenue website. So if you look at October, it was about 12.99 million. And so that falls comfortably within our range, and that's just for adult use sales. And I am not going to make an estimate on how much medical cannabis is making as part of the market, um, because I don't have an idea of like how big the actual population size is. But I can't imagine that it would extend past the top of our bound at 21 million. So this estimate should fall comfortably within that range. I think you can go to the next slide, Kens. So this is the core of our survey, and just to give an overview of how we go about this is we ask about, I believe it is 9 different product types and 7 different sources in this specific survey. So when you add those or multiply those two together, you get about 63 product and source combinations. So participants are asked about the sources that they've used within the past month and the types of products that they've used within the past month. And then when they say, you know, I've used an adult use or medical cannabis dispensary for flower only, they're shown that question, and then they're asked to respond to the number of units, which in this case would be grams, and how much they've spent on that product within the past month. This gives us a way to estimate how much is being spent in each one of these categories, and can give you these dollar signs that you see, which is the first table, is expenditures specifically for each one of these. When you see that dash, it means that our model estimates were telling us that no one had clicked on that, so it would give us a proportion of 0. When you have a small sample size like this, it could just not be picking up those individuals that purchased from the net. So it's not necessarily that nobody in the market would be spending on this. It's just from our survey sample, no one had clicked on it. And so our model estimate is giving a 0 in that category.
And the patient versus non-patient, Gideon, that's self-identified, right?
Yes, it is. So
Okay.
This goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where this survey is designed to be past month cannabis consumers as a whole. And if we had some idea of the demographics, county distribution, the number of cannabis use days in the past month of patients, we can make claims about it being representative of patients as well, but we cannot. So we just have to rely on, okay, among the past month consumers that have responded to our survey, these individuals are identifying themselves as patients. And so we can look at the differences between non-patients and patients, but we can't make the same representation claims as the total population.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I think the next slide will, yes.
Gideon, what was the sample size for the survey?
It was 263.
Gotcha.
And I believe the past month cannabis consumers in Vermont from NISDA was 124,000. Is that correct, Kens? That was the
Yes.
the NISDA estimate.
That is the approximate, right?
Yes, and that is the lower bound that we typically use to design our weights. So the first thing that jumps out to me from looking at this tables, and we'll just briefly go over this, is the difference between spending on concentrates and vapes between patients and non-patients. As long as I've been doing this, this is the largest gap I've seen between the two. Generally speaking, patients and non-patients tend to be roughly equivalent, and you know there is some deviation between products, but roughly equivalent in their spending and unit consumption within the month. But it is very noticeable that these gaps are pretty large between the two. So if you look at flower, it's roughly comparable. Pre-rolls is roughly comparable. Edibles is roughly comparable. Adult use consumers do tend to spend a little bit more on beverages than patients, but this trend reverses specifically with concentrates and vapes. And just to get an idea of what you're looking at, this is basically taking the average, taking into account the weights that we've produced to make it representative, and then taking the average of everybody in the state. So it's best to think of these averages as not not of any individual person, but just as everybody in the market. If I was to add up all of their spending, this would be the number essentially that you would get. So it's not saying, this person's buying one beverage for $3.91. It's basically saying if I have a bunch of people saying that they didn't spend any money on this, and then a few people saying they spent a lot of money, you would just get some average, and that's what this is representing. And I think that you can go to the next one, kids.
I had one maybe just like technical question about that last
Yeah.
slide. There's dollar amounts associated with the free and gifted. Is there a
Yeah.
reason for that?
Yeah, so it depends on how you define. So we leave it up to the respondents to go about how they would define for that. You could design the survey in a way that they cannot put any dollar amounts towards that, but we give them the option to say, I spent this much on free or gifted cannabis. And depending on how you define gifting or interpret that, you could say, I paid a remuneration, I believe that's the term, on cannabis that was purchased by somebody else. I paid it to that person and nobody made any profit from that, but I still ended up spending money on that cannabis. So
Gotcha.
that could
Yeah.
presumably under some definitions fall into gifted cannabis, but we let individuals interpret how they will. The same for
Gotcha.
home grow. Depending on how you define spending in home grow, you're not spending money in the sense that you're purchasing it from anybody, but you are putting money in to produce the cannabis. So we let participants report a expenditure amount in that category as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this is just the average monthly expenditures by all past month consumers. So this is removing the breakdown and just going for the totals. So on average, everybody is spending about $196. So this includes patients and non-patients, and they're spending about $134.69 on adult use and medical spending. As we've seen in other states, flower tends to dominate. You can see that at about $78, and then you get a healthy distribution of the rest of the products. And tinctures, topicals, and capsules always are within our lowest categories across the states. And then you can see the breakdowns individually between patients and non-patients. So according to our survey, it looks like patients are spending quite a bit more than non-patients, but it is proportional to their spending pattern. So they are spending more, but in a proportional amount to non-patients. And I'll keep adding in this is not designed to be representative of patients, but it is useful to be informed at least about what they are saying in our survey.
And that, Gideon, just to harp on this a little bit, is not necessarily that they are registered patients, is that they identify that they're patients. So it might be just that their perception of the reason that they use cannabis, right? They're not necessarily registered because we have a very small registered patient population.
Yes.
Okay.
So our survey asks specifically, it's called time being a medical patient. So they're presented with, I believe it is 5 options. So they either say, I've never been a medical patient, I was a medical patient and I no longer am, or I became a medical patient 5 years ago, within the last few years, or within the past year. And so this is just taking those 3 options and breaking it down to a 1-0 variable. So current patients, people who are no longer patients.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I think you can go to the next slide, kids. And so as I was saying earlier, this is the by unit. So for each individual product type, participants are asked to respond in the units that product typically comes in. So for flower pre-rolls, that is grams. Concentrates and vapes are also grams. Beverages are in beverages, and edibles are in packages. And then tinctures are in units, as well as topicals and capsules are in packages. So this will just be respondents when we tell them, this is in this specific units. Tell us how much that you've purchased or obtained from these individual sources within the past month. Again, you can see that the differentiation between patients and non-patients is happening at the concentrates and vapes level, and as well for edibles. So you don't see a huge differentiation in edibles in price, but you do see in the number of units that they've said that they've obtained within the past month. But as far as vapes and concentrates go, the trend is consistent from the expenditures. And then flowers is roughly comparable. Adult use consumers are using a little bit more flower and a little bit more pre-rolls, as well as beverages. I think you can go to the next one, Ken's. And so I'll condition this with another statement. I will always do this. There is a litany of ways to measure regulated market participation. I specifically use in dollars because it is a consistent unit across products. So if you were to do this by weight or by unit, you might get a different percentage. For example, if I'm getting a large number of units, I necessarily would have to convert them into to flower grams. Everything essentially goes back to grams because that's how it's cultivated. So you can always do it by weight or by percentage of, say, I consumed 20 grams of flower in the past month in total. Well, you might have 10 grams in free or gifted, 10 grams in the adult use market, but you could have spent quite a bit more on the adult use market. And so you would end up with a higher percentage than if you used just the weight. So I prefer dollars because it's a consistent unit across products. Everything has to be purchased in dollars for the most part. So this is what the distribution that you're looking at in dollars. So it's about, for adult use consumers, it's about 69% are getting it from the regulated market, with expenditures being distributed among the rest of the categories that you see.
How is illicit defined, Gideon, or is it defined in your questions in the survey?
Yeah, so this specific question is if you've purchased from a illicit cannabis seller, or et cetera. So it could be an unregulated source or et cetera, but just identifying that it is somebody not selling on behalf of the regulated market. So we leave that open to interpretation on how individuals respond to that. But if you were to, for example, define within a state that purchasing from an illicit or purchasing from friends and family is not legal within the state, but gifting is, you can change these numbers to represent that. So we get individual sources, but depending on the state, you can add these percentages together to essentially say, this is the gray market, this is the illicit market, or this is the regulated sales. So this is broken out by the individual sources specifically, but illicit is just not from a regulated seller.
And sorry if you said this, but people could choose multiple options, right?
They could.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So they can choose any combination of options that they would like.
In the adult use delivery illicit, what's that category comprised of?
So adult use or medical delivery is just that. So it was a source that people put. It is up to their interpretation of what that means. So if they're saying, hey, I had a friend buy from a market, but they delivered it to my house, they might put it under that. But this is for pressing that source just alone. So it's its own standalone source. For medical patients, for example, if they're saying that they get delivery, we would categorize that as part of the regulated market in their estimates. I think you can go to the next one, Kens. And so this is our by patient distribution. And so dispensary is now including the adult use or medical delivery in the calculation. And between the two, it seems that purchasing from friends and family is the differentiating factor between the two. There's some variation, but medical patients seem to be reporting that they're purchasing from friends or family at a higher rate or expending more money towards that.
Right. And those purchases from the friends and family, like the origination of that purchase could have been within the regulated market. Like we have no way of knowing, right, Gideon?
Yes, correct. This is the different from the track and trace system where if there is a registered sale, it is coming from the adult use or medical market. From here, we only have the last chain, so we have the actual consumer. So they could say, I am buying from an other source or purchasing from friends and family, but we aren't surveying the next part of that chain where they could say, I bought this from a medical or adult use cannabis dispensary. So this is where we rely on the estimates for cross-validation, because if we are looking at just estimating the market size for regulated, we would just look at adult use and medical cannabis dispensaries and say, okay, does this number match up to what the regulated sales actually are? Because that is the only cross-validation possible for this type of survey.
Gideon, if I recall, there were a few questions that tried to make sure the respondents knew the difference between an adult use product and a hemp-derived intoxicating product. Right? I seem to remember, just to make sure that we're actually capturing adult use demand, not because one of the things we're asking for is scenario planning, and if the federal hemp ban does go into effect, just making sure that's included in here.
Yeah, so throughout the survey, there's a cannabis specific demand section, and then there's a hemp section that asks specifically about hemp products, and they have to read a paragraph defining those to answer the questions before they enter.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, of course. I think you can go to the next one, Kens. Okay. So this is just they were switching on my screen. This is just the percent of dollars spent in the regulated market. So for non-patients, it's about 68.6%. Patients are 67%, and this is a total of 68.4%. So when you combine these two together, non-patients make up a higher percentage of past month cannabis consumers than patients. So this number drags towards the non-patient figure. And this is in dollars. So we ask participants to respond on the reasons that they purchase for any cannabis products. So we don't ask them about, in this question specifically, we don't ask them, why do you purchase from this individual source? What's the reason? This is just for any cannabis products in general. So this is meant to cover all of them. THC potency was the highest at 66%. So they can press on as many of these as they want to, but the agreement among all cannabis consumers is 66% of past month cannabis consumers say that they purchase cannabis products for THC potency, and about 64% purchase for price. These, out of all the studies that I've been a part of, these tend to be the top two across every state that I've worked in. It is becoming more. I have seen it a lot more recently that potency will actually beat out price. In some of the earlier studies I did, price consistently will beat out THC potency, but recently it has been switching at least within 1 percentage point. It's never too far apart. But as you can tell, everything else after those two tends to be a pretty good distribution. You get source and strain and convenience at the 40% mark, and safety, whether the product is tested, at roughly 40%. And then 28% is whether it's obtained legally, or terpenes and CBD or other non-potency, and delivered is about 8%. That tends to be pretty consistent with some of our other results. And then none of the above is just 1%. So that could be anything else. So this is the reasons for purchasing from the unregulated market. So you can define this, and we work with other states to define on who sees this question in each state. But for this specifically, we use the purchase from friends or family, or purchase from a non-regulated cannabis seller, that illicit category. So these are the only ones that would see that question. So if you clicked on either one of those sources and for any number of products, you would see this exact same question. So this question is only presented to those people's and not the entire market. So just to keep that in mind, this is not to be representative of the entire Vermont population, just those that clicked on that. But the weights should incorporate that it's representative of those individuals within past month cannabis consumers that have clicked on that. So just as a point, this is the most consensus I've ever seen on this question, at 70% saying it's cheaper. So the number one reason for purchasing in the unregulated market is just that it's cheaper. These percentages tend to be distributed pretty well across the board. So it was surprising to me to see such consistency on responses. It's more convenient at 50%. And then sorry, Ken, this is kind of small on my screen. I prefer to support members of my community or small business. I get products I like more at 25%. And I can purchase higher potency products not available at dispensaries at 24%. I don't trust the government regulating cannabis at 20%. And then I trust the product more than what is sold at a regulated store at 13%. So as you can see, at 2 and 1%, there's no adult use stores or no medical stores in my area. Because of how low this percentage is, I think it's comfortable to say that access is not a reason for individuals purchasing within the unregulated market. It's more about convenience or the price of products. You can tell at 24 or I think it's 24 or 25%, I get the products I like more, or I can purchase higher potency products now available at dispensaries. We can talk about that more later, but it is pretty close to the expenditures amount, which is about 31%, saying that I purchase outside of the regulated market. But these numbers are pretty consistent with that. I think you can go to the next one, Kent. Okay, so this is from the abridged version of this presentation. This is the story that we're getting, and there will be a longer in-depth analysis of the rest of the survey questions that we have for the report. But just from this analysis, the story that we're getting is that Vermont's regulated market, as far as expenditures goes, is lower than what you would expect at, I believe it is year 4 of regulated sales. Is that correct? Or is it less than that?
October 22 is our first.
Okay. So this isn't a drastic call to say it's that much worse than what we've seen in other states. Generally speaking, we see between 70% and 90%, and depending on which state you're in, there is a huge variety of what participants will say that they've expended within the past month. But it is on the lower end of what we've looked at before. So it tends to hover around the high 70s. And some of the recent studies that we've done were in the high 70s. So you would expect it to be a little bit higher, but it's not a drastic claim that it's that much lower than everywhere else. Again, 70% of people saying that they purchase in the unregulated market because it's cheaper. This is by far the highest consensus I've seen in that question specifically. And then something to note is the large gap between medical patients and non-medical patients in purchasing patterns. So that'll go back to the concentrates and vapes and edibles when you look at the units. Just some other things that stand out: 25 or 24% purchased in the unregulated market because they get products they like more or because they can get higher concentrated products. This actually trends with some academic literature that's looked at some of the regulations in Canada that found that consumers in those states that have potency or product restrictions have a lower propensity to purchase those products within the regulated market. So it's not something that deviates from academic literature. So that's not surprising. It just wanted to make a note of it. Again, THC potency, it was rare for this to beat price in the past, but it is becoming more common. So all that being said, it looks to, at least from the analysis that we've done so far, that it's not as much a access issue as it is a convenience or product access issue. Lowering prices or lowering the restrictions in the market could increase this expenditures amount. And there's a whole variety of policy solutions that lead to the final price of a cannabis product. But those seems to be the consistent findings within the report so far. And expanding geographic retail density. So about 50% said it's more convenient. Expanding geographic density seems to be the only solution to that item, as far as not necessarily increasing access, but just making it easier to obtain cannabis products. Delivery probably would make that percentage go down a little bit if that was available as well. But typically speaking, the competition and lower prices should increase market expenditures. There's a whole variety of factors if you were to model this out on how you actually get that number up. But just from a policy perspective, that is what I'm seeing so far.
On the first one, Gideon, do you think that our competition with our neighboring states, which are much larger in population, is part of that low performance or not performing as well as it should?
So it is possible. So if that was the case, and you do see this in some other states, if there was a huge gap between prices in that state versus in Vermont, you might expect to see that number to be a little bit lower. But I can't make any definitive claims about that because I don't know the comparison between the two.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I also ran that number. We asked that question in our survey if folks are, if they had traveled to purchase cannabis outside of the state, and it was very few percent. I can go grab that for you, but I recall being like, oh, that's great. So just something to note. But to Gideon's point, it's possible.
Mackenzie, on the flip side of that statement, people traveling to Vermont, and when they travel to Vermont, what's their taxable sale product market basket look like? And I just think generally in Vermont, tourism makes up like 9% of our GDP. It's 3 times the national average. It's a big part of how Vermont does business. And so I wonder how that's reconciled with a lot of surveying of Vermont residents and their cannabis usage monthly.
Gideon, do you want to answer that?
So for that question, you would need to look at the taxable sales and see how it varies with seasonal variation in tourism. So if you can conceive of a data set that has tourists from different parts of the country coming to Vermont and how that varies with the actual taxable sales within the state, because we focus in this study, or at least in this sample, on the actual residents, I can't make any claims about that, but I can say that it is possible to see how those things vary with taxable sales, or at least in the track and trace system, based on variation in tourism. I just can't speak to it within this portion of the report.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And New Hampshire doesn't have a regulated market, so we get day travelers, day tourists, however they're labeled, and then the folks that come up at various points around the year. So that's always just a part of this conversation in my mind.
Yeah, and I strongly believe it should be a conversation in every state, because we do know that people travel for work, they travel for just tourism in general, and they do consume within the market when they are in the state. So it should always be a part of, as far as demand goes in cannabis consumption within markets, is people and their proximity to other states. So I agree.
Thank you.
Gideon, on that, just the first point, the first bullet about not performing as well as it should compared to other states. In the final report, I'd love to dig in on that issue a little bit, mostly because the unregulated sources of cannabis are always going to be cheaper. Us trying to chase after like price parity with the unregulated market is probably not achievable ever. I mean, even if not for the tax rate alone, these products are taxed at 20% compared to the unregulated sources. So I would like to see, if possible, I know that you may not have this data available, but how the price of cannabis in Massachusetts or New York is driving that, that rationale to stay on the illicit market. 70% in Vermont saying that price is what's keeping them on the unregulated side. Is that like, how much do we gain by, how much of the illicit market do we gain by dropping the price of cannabis by, $10 an ounce,
dropping the tax rate or just the
or dropping the tax rate? I mean, ultimately, we have a bill in the Senate here that essentially is going to try to capture a lot more of the unregulated market in various strategies, including dropping the tax rate. And so, I mean, as far as like scenario planning, I'd love to see you guys analyze how, though, if those changes, may impact our demand for regulated cannabis. But the broader point is, Massachusetts, if their average price per gram or price per ounce is $50 cheaper than Vermont, how is that changing their market capture?
Yeah. So I would have to go check if we have the data sources available to actually conduct that analysis, but it is possible. What you're saying, it is possible, and that change on, what percentage increase in expenditures in this state will we get from a, X, Y, or Z drop in the price of flower products or the wholesale price of flower. You can model that out. It's just the data that you need to be able to do that. And you need it for the states that you're interested in looking at. Right. So we might model this out in a different state, and you can only make claims for that state. You might be able to do it nationally and say, okay, nationally on average, the change in price can get you Y percentage in increase in the expenditures. But it might change, or there might be variation among the states within there. So it is possible to do what you're saying, and I don't know if we have the data off the top of my head to be able to make claims for like Massachusetts, for example. But this is also going back to the point that this is not performing as well as it should is more of a normative assessment. If you're looking at just expenditures, that is saying, on this metric, how is it performing in comparison to other states? Each state has its own policy priorities, and that should be the right of states to define what actual success in the market looks like. So that's just I want to be conditional about how I say that. Just looking at the expenditures is just one aspect of all the metrics that you could look at in the market.
Great. Well, I don't want to add, a ton more analysis for especially data sets that you may not have access to, but maybe we can just kind of think about you mentioned competition. We can certainly increase the competition. We hear reports from the cultivators currently that there already are seasonal oversupplies and gluts. The retailers are oftentimes saying that we're one of the most, on a per capita basis, most densely retail oriented states in the country. So increasing the competition if we're chasing after lower prices, maybe better for the consumer, but there is going to come a point where it costs more for these cultivators to grow weed than they're getting a profit. There's too much price compression that they can't exist.
Yeah.
So anyway, we can dig in maybe offline. We can think about how, or just think about the strategies for getting a lower price while still making this industry profitable for the licensees.
Yeah, I agree. It's a delicate balance between that. It's hard to know what that limit is as far as like price compression within states. And there is policy options that would lower price without necessarily increasing competition. It's just about how the state wants to go about doing that. But I definitely take your point that it is certainly a concern as prices drop, that margin does get smaller. And if competition increases, the margins do get even smaller. So I definitely take your point, and I agree. It's just balancing the demands of consumers with what is actually viable for the market to sustain in the long term.
Great. Is this your last slide? I only want to give a time check to the board members because we have another presentation right after this.
I was just going to end with, well, one, thank you. And to Gideon's point, it's the state and, in this case, I think the legislature, what does this and what makes a healthy, focused market? What does that actually look like? And there was priorities that drove things like potency caps initially. If now it's more capturing unregulated sales, this could help drive, evidence,
Right.
if that's what they want to focus on beyond.
What are the policy goals? What is the
Sure.
market goal?
Yes,
Right? The whole.
That's a short way to say what I danced around. And I mean, we've put forward the potency cap issue previously. I know there's a number of bills that are trying to do that now. So this work will certainly help spur that conversation. So thank you.
This is, incredibly useful information, not just for us, but for the entire market. I think that I'd love to work with you all in whatever time we have left under our contract to think about how certain changes to state policy might impact the demand for regulated cannabis and how that might impact just seasonal oversupply and licensing decisions that we make here. So, but any other immediate questions or concerns while we're all together?
No, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
this is
guys.
great. All right.
I'm just gonna plug in my laptop.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I got a.
There.
Yeah, I got. Some.
Oh, I don't.
Well, you can plug in here if you want.
I got it plugged.
Oh, sorry. Oh, that was your HP thing.
All right. So I did see a hand go up from the public. We do have one more public comment session at the end of the meeting, but we're just going to keep moving down the agenda for now. Next up is we're going to hear from ACCD about the Cannabis Business Development Fund. Nathan Davidson, who's been kind of assigned to liaise with the board on this issue and has been keeping track of the numbers for us. Thanks for joining us. This is a really important fund. The purpose is really important, and it didn't get any additional general fund contribution or excise tax contribution last year. So I think this is a kind of critical time for us to understand
We're hoping to change that.
Understand where the fund's at and just how useful it's been for its participants.
Yes, certainly. Appreciate you all having me and everybody on the call attending. Just background, Nathan Davidson. I work with the Vermont Department of Economic Development, and we administer the Cannabis Business Development Fund, which distributes beneficiary payments to social equity licensed cannabis businesses, as well as offers technical assistance through a consulting firm, Rhodes Consulting, who the state has contracted with. I believe I sent over slides, but if we aren't able to pull those up, it's no problem. Perfect.
Patrick is on it.
Copy and pasted the big old weed plant I used in my last presentation. Can go over to the next slide. So just an overview on what has been spent so far in the fund. The fund originally received two $50,000 donations from integrated licensees. Those funds were spent at the beginning of the fund's creation, early 2023. And we saw a lot of that go to beneficiary payments, which are $5,000 payments, which go directly to the business owner each time they renew their license. The other 30% going to Rhodes Consulting for technical assistance. That kind of is used as the baseline for demand that we saw between beneficiary payments and Rhodes Consulting. Then once we got the first appropriation of $500,000 to the fund, we saw that demand for Rhodes Consulting boom. That was the initial period in which everybody was eligible for 28 hours of assistance through Rhodes Consulting, and everybody jumped on it. And that would encompass services ranging from financial assistance and seeking funding, all the way to marketing, design, website development, and bookkeeping activities. What we've seen over time through each of these $500,000 appropriations is that Rhodes Consulting design and website development services have been in the greatest demand, primarily from the cultivating community, as cultivators make up the majority of social equity licensees in the state. As you'll see in appropriation number 2, we saw a decreased demand for Rhodes Consulting. I'm not entirely sure why it is, but we did do a revamp of marketing to social equity licensees in this third appropriation. We reached out to folks in September of 2025. Around that time, the Rhodes Consulting Group would contact people who had previously used their services to see if they're still interested. And it seemed that some people had either forgotten Rhodes was there or just, kept in the back of their mind, because we've seen a big boom in Rhodes Consulting services being received since that kind of promotional resurgence. The majority of those services are falling under marketing and website development activities. Those who were seeking bookkeeping services early on seem to have gotten into QuickBooks and established the processes that they needed for their business. And really, we're seeing that demand is just marketing and website development at this point. You can go on to the next slide. And then just an overview on how many payments we've distributed so far. On this application status chart, you'll see 192 applications have been awarded. And you'll see a total of 9 applications are in supplier setup or ready for vision export. Those are just applications which we're currently processing. So we're very close to surpassing the 200 mark for beneficiary payments having been distributed. Those payments have been distributed to around 80 unique businesses across the state. I don't have the exact figure off the top of my head, but it's approximately 80 businesses that those payments have been distributed to. At the end of 2025, we had opened up a 4th round of payments to folks. We had capped it at 3 payments previously, but after opening it up to a 4th round for those who had already received their first 3 payments and had renewed their license 4 times, or renewed their license 3 times and initially licensed once, we've seen a lot of applications coming in a short period. We've received around 25 applications since marketing that 4th round of payments at the beginning of December 2025. It's only been about 2 months, and a lot of applications have been coming in. And in terms of administrative burden for the program and how long it takes us to respond to these applicants, we've tried to do a better and better job of refining our process over time in terms of the difference in time between when we receive an application and when we finished processing it and getting it through the bureaucracy, which can sometimes be state government. Um, you can see through each payment, it's reduced over time. And really our main holdup right now is just the time it takes to mail these checks to folks. Overall, it's a really easy application for people to complete, very low burden, which is what we were hearing when we were tasked with establishing this fund, is that they wanted it to be as low burdensome as possible for applicants. So we're hopeful that we've been doing a good job at that. Yeah, next slide. And then just going over the funds that we've distributed by each business type and tier. It directly, because these are beneficiary payments, because this is in a competitive application and it's only getting distributed to those who are eligible, we're seeing the majority of payments going to those who make up social equity licensees. A lot of social equity licensees are cultivators, and in particular, they're smaller tier cultivators. So that's why the majority of funding has gone to tier 1 businesses, and 80% of all payments have gone to cultivators as a whole. That just seems to be the majority of those social equity licensees out there. You can go on to the next slide where we see kind of, going into geographic distribution. Sorry, I'm just confusing my slides there. In my last presentation in May, we had seen a pretty equitable distribution of payments per each region. And by that, I mean 25 payments being distributed to an area with 25 social equity businesses, as opposed to 10 payments being distributed to that area. So 12% of all social equity businesses were existing in Chittenden County when I last gave this presentation, and we were distributing about 11% of our payments to Chittenden County. So it's pretty well aligned. Now we're seeing that things are veering a little bit. Chittenden County is receiving somewhat of an increased, or becoming somewhat of an increased recipient of beneficiary payments. I think this is largely attributable to the amount of retailers located in Chittenden County. Out of those businesses who are eligible, retailers seem to be the ones who are the most up-to-date and timely with submitting their applications for beneficiary payments. I'm assuming that has to do with either having administrative staff available to do that work, or just the amount of time that they have on their hands, which they're not in the field cultivating, harvesting, maintaining their crops. And in addition to that, we've seen that the amount of payments going to Washington, Lamoille, and Windsor County have decreased as well, even though those counties seem to make up a decent percentage of where social equity businesses are located. Not 100% sure why that is, but I wouldn't say it's reason for raising a red flag or sounding the alarm necessarily. But where our office has discussed perhaps doing more targeted outreach to those who we know are eligible. Right now, the CCB licensing team will send out notifications once a business is eligible to submit an application. Our office sometimes has concerns about whether or not those emails are going into a spam folder or not. We aren't calling up these individuals directly if they aren't responding to the email. So maybe there are those who have just been missing out on this opportunity as a whole, and we want to try to maybe discuss doing more targeted outreach to those regions in particular, just to everybody who's a social equity licensed business. You can move.
So
go on
Nathan,
to the next slide.
If I understand correctly, you've done 4 payments, but just because somebody was eligible for one doesn't mean that they automatically are distributed the next one. They still gotta get back out in touch with ACCD. They gotta take that initiative.
Yep. So the process works where the CCB licensing team will send an email once they've relicensed and are a social equity business, have been deemed a social equity business. And then they'll need to submit an application for each payment to our office. They just have to click on a link and go through an online application form. And then once we receive that, we start the process of giving them their payment.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. This is the slide I was thinking would kind of switch the story in terms of retailers versus cultivators seeking assistance through this program. Some of this data was somewhat messed up because it was linked to the wrong spreadsheet by accident. The total number of hours that we've distributed through Rhodes Consulting is actually at 1,593 hours at this point. And the majority of applicants who we're seeing for Rhodes Consulting services now is actually retailers. And the majority of that service is falling under website and design. We've rarely seen anybody seek IT, HR, or accounting services at this point, largely because those were more heavily sought after in the early stage of the program, although IT and HR were never that high in demand. And like I said, with like QuickBooks, I think those who needed to get an accounting process established for their business early on have already done so with Rhodes Consulting, meaning that the low-hanging fruit remaining is just marketing and design, really.
Nathan,
And I'm not quite sure why retailers are. Oh.
Sorry. Particularly when it comes to cultivators, are there services that Rhodes can't provide? Like there's no, cultivation isn't up there. Like, when folks run into issues with pests, those things aren't up there. Are those services that Rhodes can contract out, or are those things that people are even requesting at this point?
So yeah, that's a good question. Rhodes will advertise their services after a business reaches out to meet with Rhodes Consulting. Rhodes will provide the kind of one-page overview of the services that they can provide, which doesn't include agricultural assistance. They aren't agriculture. They don't have a level of agricultural expertise, which we could use to support our cannabis cultivating community. They really fall under the realm of business development. So when we look at items like strategic planning, it's more so about refining your processing if you are a manufacturer to increase your margin to the greatest extent, instead of referring specific pesticides that should be used or specific watering techniques for different strains. They don't have that level of expertise.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Not to be a broken record, but I really hope the conversations this session around business and strategic planning go somewhere, because the fact that only 2 hours were spent with outdoor cultivators concerns me a little bit, with the ever changing floor of federal legalization and interstate compacts and so on and so forth. But I know that that's partly what the cultivator is interested in and partly what Rhodes feels comfortable advising on.
Yeah. And I know that there is legislation. Hopefully we'll see some change this year.
Thank you.
You can go on to the next slide. And this is an overview of both the hours that have been distributed to businesses since my last report, since May of 2025. The number on the left of each slice of this pie chart is the number of unique businesses that have received a service under that business type. So there have been 5 unique retailers who have received services through Rhodes Consulting, for a total of 149 hours of technical assistance. As you can see, this is kind of where things flip. This is where we see an increased demand from retailers for Rhodes Consulting, where they had a lower demand for beneficiary payments. Retailers make up a smaller contingent of social equity licensees, so fewer of them are eligible for beneficiary payments year over year. But because retailers, I believe, just have more time on their hand and more administrative capacity to take on these consulting hours, we're seeing them have a disproportionate demand for Rhodes Consulting. Their demand for Rhodes is surpassing each cultivating group individually.
And you said that the highest demand among retailers was web design and marketing. Is that right?
Yep.
For Rhodes Consultant for hours, technical assistance hours?
Yep. So the majority of it is website development and branding. So different logo designs, different product labeling designs, while still trying to ensure that it's compliant with Vermont guidelines. And we see that trend extend beyond retailers as well. That's the service that the majority of cannabis businesses are still seeking, even amongst cultivators and manufacturers. And just to end it off, we had another mistake here, linked to the wrong spreadsheet, that same issue. I realized this morning. These numbers are wrong, and I'm here to correct them. The percentage of social equity businesses that we've observed surviving over time has actually been around 89%, while standard businesses were actually looking at around 83%. Those have just been, we regularly poll the number of businesses on the CCB licensee's website and assess which ones are still remaining alive as a result. And those percentages include vertically integrated businesses as well. So if under one umbrella you have a manufacturing, a cultivating, and a retail business, we would look at each of those as an individual business, not as a whole. So we're hopeful that the fund is making some sort of impact on the survival rates of these businesses.
Yeah.
Nathan, thank you for the presentation. I know you guys are not taking the costs incurred in administering the funds like you're entitled to do, so that more money can actually go out to the field. I really appreciate that. Do you have any sense? We have 88 social equity licensees. That's not historic to how many people you've served over the last 3 years. I forget that number, but is total general fund contribution of 1.5 million historically to this fund, how does that compare to other economic development investments that the state makes that you guys oversee? Do you have any? I know it's never going to be apples to apples, but I just am curious, how that compares.
Yeah, so I mean, when we look at performance measures for other programs, we're looking at increased employment count, the return on investment for a business. So we have an international trade program where we'll incentivize businesses to attend trade shows overseas, and we'll look at what the grant amount that we've given them as opposed to the export sales they've received as a result, and then get a single return on investment figure. For our Vermont training program, we'll look at the increase in employment as a result of subsidizing the training for a manufacturer. Those kind of determinants aren't really used in this program, as first of all, it's not a grant program. It's something, being a beneficiary payment, it's something that each of these licensees are owed. And the ideology behind the program as well, while it is economic development, it's not a targeted projects program. We aren't providing funding specifically for on-site wells, and then we can pull measures as a result. How many more plants are you growing annually as a result of that well? We just don't have the reporting to really make those determinants.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you know, you probably have this number somewhere, just what the balance in the fund is currently?
Yep, so we have around 300,000 remaining, 325,000 remaining. We're working through the final $500,000 appropriation, with the rest of the funds having already been spent.
Do you expect that if you just continue on with the maybe like historic roads versus beneficiary payments breakdown, that to be fully expended by the end of the calendar year?
We do expect it to be fully expended by the calendar year, with a new round of beneficiary payments being sent out, as well as continued payments for those fourth rounders and even third rounders being distributed still. And in terms of roads consulting, we recently re-upped their contract by another $50,000, which doesn't deduct from that 325,000 remaining. And while we are willing to re-up, we have to see that there's continued demand for roads consulting by the end of that contract. We expect to be able to get all the money, or the majority of the money, out the door by the end of this year. It really depends on the number of payments that are distributed.
Right.
And the first deposit, right, to this happened before we started licensing people, right? So it's really catching up to itself now.
Right.
Yeah.
And just a quick administrative question. I know you said some of those numbers on the survival rate were off. Are you able to update those so we can put your presentation on our website with the correct ones? Unless I misunderstood.
Yep, I'll send that over end of this week.
Great, thank you.
I mean, the like $1 million question literally is, if you had a dedicated revenue source to this fund, would you design the program differently and, you know, maybe track KPIs differently and just do things differently? If you weren't just saying like, oh, well, maybe we'll get some money this year, maybe we won't. You know, if you had that clarity, this is part of ACCD's base funding. You think you would do things differently? Or is that something you want to talk about internally first?
No, we've had internal discussions about it, and we have talked about having funds distributed specifically for testing costs or for insurance expenses or for specific projects which expand the business, which is personally where I lean towards. But we are open to doing it differently, reporting on outcomes, and making more of a competitive grant program, or one where the funds are distributed for a specific business purpose as opposed to a beneficiary payment. If we were to be targeted projects, we unfortunately aren't ag experts, and certainly aren't cannabis experts. So there would need to be some sort of collaboration from Department of Ag or WLEI or somebody who has that level of expertise.
That's where all of Nathan and I's conversations are coming.
Yeah, so I was going to say, you've shared the report that we did with Nathan and gone over it, so.
All right.
Yeah, a little bit.
Thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the time.
No. Thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
As always.
All right. Moving down the agenda, Olga, we're ready for our executive director report.
If I could. I know we have a huge agenda, so I might just might do very little talking.
Okay.
And
great.
try to get us through those slides pretty quickly.
Yep.
Since they'll be posted on the website for anybody who may want to dig deep later.
Great.
Let's see. All right. So here we go, January 28, 2026, our standard board report for you. So a quick update on the education and outreach initiative. Some of you might have seen in the newsletter already, but starting this year, our staff will host a new educational webinar series called CCB Insights. This series will be focused on sharing timely information and practical guidance on a range of relevant topics. And the first webinar will take place on February 4th at 1 o'clock. And it will go over the latest updates to the advertising guidance. And we hope folks will join us for the kickoff of this new series. And I'll keep moving on and start with our licensing data for the adult use program. You could see here, we remain at 571 active licenses, same as last month. We've touched on in the prior meetings on that sort of artificial spike in the early 2025, which was tied to the announcement of the closure of some window for some applications. So again, we are staying steady months over months. Taking a closer look again, since we're not seeing changes in the total number of licenses, very minor changes here. Just we are reflecting that our last integrated licensee has exited officially, has really relinquished their license and received some other licenses. So that's basically the one big change month over month. Moving on, a quick look at the our priority status slide. Again, no changes here month over month.
Just going back to the conversation we just had, right? To put a finer point on what you said, that's 86 special equity licensees and they've served 80. So that's almost everybody.
Yeah. Yep.
And I know our licensing team does a lot to promote
Yes.
the fund. So I know they take a lot of responsibility here.
Yes.
All right. I will quickly just go through our standard slides on license priority status. I'm only including them here so we have more of a reference point for tracking trends through 2026. So again, we are just looking at the priority status of all active licenses here over the past 3 months, just as a benchmark. So you could see those numbers. And then that's the cultivator priority status slide. Next is our manufacturers. Again, very, very minor changes months over months. And retailers. So no changes for retailers. Okay, moving on. A quick look at our cultivator licensing data, broken down by type and tier. Again, very few changes, and the yellow color is our January data for those who want to take a close look later. Okay, just a gain of indoor tier 5, that's our integrated licensee. Quick look at the manufacturers, broken down by type and tiers as well. Next is our licensed canopy capacity slide. We are showing a slight increase in numbers. Again, that's us accounting for the new tier 5 indoor licensee. So the bump in the indoor capacity is accounting for that license.
And that's from the integrated license
Yes.
that was broken. Okay.
Yep. And prior to that, the integrated were not accounted in this capacity, canopy capacity. So now we are caught up. Okay, and the final slide here on this section is our relinquishments. So only 3 relinquishments in the month of January. As you could see here, if you look at the slide to your right, you'll see that one is our integrated license. So again, it's a relinquishment, but really we gained several licenses, 1 retailer and a mixed tier 1 cultivator. Okay, so that's a quick section here. I'll now jump into the compliance and enforcement data. Very familiar slides to you all here. A quick snapshot. 70 inspections shown in blue and 18 investigations reported by our team. And now a little more color on just the inspections. You could see that majority of the inspections involved our retail community, 34 inspections, and then 19 cultivator inspections, 16 manufacturing, and a wholesale. Next is our investigations slide. You could see again that the main focus for the month of January was retail and cultivation primarily.
Are these are the ones in yellow just new ones, or they
Yes.
include ongoing? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it should just be all the new ones.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
the new ones. Okay.
Okay, so that's what we got. I will double check because it is interesting that we have 8, 8, and 8 months over months. But I believe we've gained some, but it might account for some ongoing, but I'll double check. Okay. Now the types of investigations. Again, each color represents a different license type to sort of make it clear who is being investigated. So a number of number of topics here. Yep. Move on. So here's what else. So sort of other types of actions that our team performed over the last 3 months again. And you could see that we had processed 32 complaints, issued 11 letters of warning, 2 notices of violation, 2 destructions, and that we oversaw, plus 2 cessations of operation documented.
Can you share, do you have the, like the amount in fines?
It's coming.
Okay.
Yep, I'll get some
Okay.
extra slides on that. Yep. Now complaint types again for you here. Advertising leads the way, followed by product related complaint this month. Then our letters of warning, again, different types of violations.
The product, sorry to go back.
Mhm.
Did any of those come through our adverse event reporting?
I think it's
On the
still
website?
fairly new. I
Okay.
don't think that we've
Okay.
gotten any yet through that yet. But
Okay.
I think the form is getting some attention. So,
Okay.
and 2 notices of violations. Same issue, sales reporting. And so that's a wrap for the monthly numbers. And now I do have a section on the compliance and enforcement data from the past year
Oh, awesome.
based on what our team has compiled. So I'll should address a few of those questions. So here you are looking at an inverted tower of data that shows a total number of complaints at the very top, right? 442. Number of investigations that resulted from those complaints, which is 162. Again, that's for the last 12 months. And then the subset of cases that led to the issuance of formal letters of warning and notices of violation. So that's the kind of a summary of those activities for the year. Moving on. Quite a busy slide here, but it provides some additional detail on the types of complaint we received and the sort of violations addressed in the letters of warning. As you could see here, the majority of complaints last year were related to advertising at 107, and advertising also accounts for the largest share of the letters of warning. 38 is that number. You could see other common complaints that include business operations, inspection violation, product quality. Again, the full report will be on the website shortly for those who want to review those in more detail. And here's the slide that also touches on the types of violations addressed via the notices of violation. And you could see most of those have been subject to were related to sales or inventory tracking reporting. And then to the right, you could see information on the penalties issued in 2025. So just over 200,000 in penalties issued and just over 62,000 collected so far. We do allow installment plans. So some of the delays in collecting fines is the reason why some of this is still owed to us.
When we say suspended, is that like the premise where X amount of dollars will be quote unquote, I guess, suspended or forgiven if you complete your corrective action plan? So
yeah, correct. And that could be a year or 2 or 3 years long. Yep. Okay, so that's what we got for you here. I've also added a product registration slide here. Again, a key takeaway here, in 2024, we registered just over 4,600 products. And in 2025, we crossed the 5,000 product mark. You could see in that chart to the top right that our flower continues to be the most commonly registered product. And now you can also see that in terms of processing timelines, our team currently takes under 15 days on average to process product registration requests. And in situations where all of the required information is submitted correctly on the first attempt, that average drops to just over 10 days. That's calendar days.
So if folks who are registering a product again, because their registrations run out, are they more likely to hit the 10 days so long as everything is complete? Nothing new is asked for, right? When they, okay.
Yeah, unless something slightly changed, but yeah, you would assume that they've gone through the steps. And, Okay, so that's what we got from our compliance team and their data. And now I have a quick slide on the advertising data for 2025. And a huge thanks to Patrick for pulling all of those numbers together for us. So again, another busy slide with a lot of charts. So starting at the top left, you could see which license types are submitting advertisements to us. Not surprisingly, retailers are the most frequent submitters, right, with 732 submissions in 2025. And that you could see in red. Now the chart in the top right shows the initial outcomes of those submissions. So most, 566, had been approved based on what was submitted, and 41 were determined not to be advertisements. So those we can kind of take out too. And then a total of 147 were denied and another 40 were partially denied. Again, that's at the point of the initial submission. Average response time is just under 3 business days at this point, closer to 2. And then looking at the bottom left at the denial reasons, you can tell probably quite easily that the most common issues related to those denials were health warning, incorrect or missing health warning with 73, audience composition concerns with 51, and then false or misleading claims at 23, and a few other reasons for denial. And then finally, that sort of pie chart in the bottom right corner, that's the chart that shows what happens after those denials had been issued. 72 submissions. So if you add up 147 plus 40 denied and denied in part, it's 187. So 74 of those had been corrected and resubmitted to us. And then out of those, 60 were approved upon those resubmissions. So that's a summary here. Yep. Now, medical program. And one quick slide here. So the trend continues. We are seeing anywhere between 20 and 70 additional patients month over month, starting around April, which we continue to attribute to the awareness about medical sales being available now at many of the retailers in the area. And a quick slide showing that we have 3 medical dispensaries and 23 retail stores, with Waitsfield being the latest retailer that secured medical endorsement. Okay. And now I have a whole new section of the report that responds to the board's requests for additional information on late renewal applications that had been processed last year, with the goal to help identify trends and evaluate how those requests should be approached going forward. And Melissa, our wonderful interim director of licensing, has prepared a series of slides that walk through this data in detail to hopefully provide the context that the board has been looking for. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so yes, we have a report to share regarding the late renewal applications over the 2025 calendar year, I just want to take a minute to go over the renewal timelines and what the expectations are. So the renewal deadline is 30 days prior to expiration. That is the date by which your renewal application must have been submitted and deemed complete by staff. An automated email is sent 120 days prior to expiration to notify the licensee that the renewal window will open in 30 days. Additional automated emails are sent at 90 and 60 days prior to expiration to notify the licensee that the renewal window is open and that the renewal deadline is 60 and 30 days away, respectively. At 45 days prior to expiration, if the licensee has not yet submitted their renewal, a manual reminder is sent by staff to notify the licensee that their expiration date is 45 days away and that they have 15 days remaining before the renewal deadline. A follow-up phone call is also made by staff within the following days if there has still not been a submission. The renewal deadline requirement of deemed complete by staff is important to define. Licensing staff almost always review renewal applications within 2 business days of submission, if not quicker. If any of the required documentation is out of date or has been omitted entirely, an incomplete letter is sent to the licensee outlining what is missing. There are certain documents that are required to be updated every year. This includes tax good standing for the business as well as each principal, current and valid insurance documentation, and current banking documentation. Licensing has made available on our website a templates and sample documents library to serve as a dedicated resource for licensees seeking examples of required renewal documents. The link to that library is also included in the 45-day reminders that are sent, as well as all incomplete letters. A few things that you can do to ensure a timely and seamless renewal process. 1, review your governing documents. This means ensuring that the documents you provided previously that we have on file are still valid. For example, if your lease expired within the last year, prepare to upload a copy of your new lease. If your government issue ID expired in the last year, supply that along with your other required documents. 2 is stay up to date on current CCB rules. For example, this past July, when our new rules took effect, there was a change in when license and local fees were due, from upon renewal approval to upon renewal submission. The rule changes also eliminated the waiver that made Tier 1 cultivators exempt from supplying a cessation of operations plan. Keeping yourself informed of rule changes and staying current can help you avoid an incomplete renewal due to omission of previously unrequired documentation. Escrow in lieu of insurance is no longer an option. If you previously had escrow, we will release it upon submission of your renewal application in order for you to obtain proper insurance coverage. Plan to submit your renewal application with plenty of time to fulfill any new requirements. And 3, look ahead to future requirements. Not all requirements come around every year. For example, background checks must be completed every 4 years. Review the date of your most recent background check to determine when the next one is due and plan for additional time to complete this requirement. Once your renewal application has been deemed complete by staff, you will see your status in the portal as complete pending board approval. If your status is incomplete, then you still owe some kind of documentation. If your status is under review, please be aware that you could potentially receive additional requests for information as the renewal moves through the review process. If your renewal application has not been submitted or remains incomplete past your renewal deadline, you will be sent communications to inform you of your late renewal status. Lastly, if you're planning on making any big changes upon renewal, such as moving locations or making any changes to the ownership structure of the business, please plan ahead. Licensing is always available to answer questions or provide guidance, and you can reach out via email to ccb.applications@vermont.gov. The overarching theme here is that submitting your renewal just a day or 2 prior to your renewal deadline is setting yourself up for the likelihood of a late renewal. Plan ahead and get started when your renewal window opens.
Thank you. Okay. Can I ask a question? Can you remind me there's a $100 120 days, 90 days, 60 days. At what point can people actually start putting things in?
At 90 days.
At 90 days.
Yes. So at 120 days, they get a notification saying in 30 days, your renewal window is open.
Okay.
And they have from 90 to 30 to get it all in.
Okay. And then in terms of the changes, can you talk about how we communicate out? I mean, we have changes all the time. So how do we communicate those out to people? We have the regular email that Patrick sends every Monday.
Yep.
Are there any other, sometimes it's on social media.
Yep. He uses social media. We have distribution lists. So Patrick again will target specific license subsets if something is pertinent specific to them. And then we have now it will be CCB Insights, formerly known as peer networking events, where we really try to address the most pressing or new things that are happening and changes that are upon us. So, and of course, licensing team communicates with links to any of the materials that will support the process. So try to do a lot. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now
So just one quick question. Sorry. So on the submission of documents, people have an ongoing obligation to keep their documents current with us. So, if someone has a minor change of ownership or organizational structure or something along those lines, they should be updating you or licensing.
They should be amending their license if there is a change in some sort of governing documents.
Okay. Yeah.
And we have an amendment request form on the licensing page on our website where people can indicate what they're looking to change or update. And then we open that amendment up for them. So even something as simple as your,
Cessation of operation plan changes.
right, exactly. Or you're leaving one insurance company and getting a different insurance, and there may be no lapse, but we need to know what's up to date.
So licensees shouldn't just wait till that 90-day window to make those changes.
That's correct. No.
So the 45-day direct phone call, you only do that if they haven't submitted anything, right?
Correct.
Do you know how many of those you do
Um,
in a year? Is it a lot? Is it a little? Is it?
it's not a little. It's not a little.
It's not a little.
Generally, if somebody gets the 45-day email, they almost always get that follow-up call, which comes a couple days later.
Yeah.
So we find that if somebody gets to that 45 days and hasn't submitted already, it's probably going to be both that email and a follow-up phone call.
You said earlier we have 500 and how many licensees?
71.
71. So
Mhm.
we really rely on people to stay on top of things, because making 571 phone calls is not something our staff can sustain. So we don't have the resources for that.
Right. And those emails, right? Because
And the follow, yes.
yeah, some of them are automatic, but there are plenty that are personalized that we do.
And I just think it's important for everybody to remember that we need administrative time to review a final application and make sure your license doesn't expire before the board meets. If your license expires or it's not complete, you're technically not able to possess the quantity of cannabis that you're legally allowed to as a licensee. So having 2 months to figure this out, in addition to, as Pepper alluded to, this ongoing duty to keep documents fresh, please don't make things harder on all of us. I think the board, at least from my perspective, it's hard to be forgiving in some ways to that end, going on year 4 of doing this and seeing the same people be late constantly.
Part of the reason why this conversation is so important is because I think what we heard loud and clear is that our regulated market wants fairness and consistency. So in order to maintain that fairness and consistency in regulation, it relies on, being able to keep this process going in a efficient manner.
I think we just got to move the perspective out there that your expiration date is not when things are due. You need to give us that move up your timeline, adjust your internal clock to the 30 days previous. That's when you should really be concerned, not the midnight before your license expires, because that puts your license in jeopardy, and it makes it so the board, to your point, is on the edge of acting arbitrary if we're helping one person where we otherwise wouldn't do it for another. And so I just hope folks can appreciate and understand that staff with over 500 licensees and doing all these calls and reminders, it's a lot to keep track of. I know it's a lot of information and documents for everybody else to keep track of as well, but let's work together to get there. I don't want to force a licensee to expire because they're late, but I think we're at this penultimate moment where if we don't see productivity and improvement in some capacities, you're really putting us in a tough spot.
Okay, so 2025 late renewal application totals. This is by month. All these numbers in all of these slides are as of the end of December. So there may have been some slight changes since then, but that is when this was put together. So 571 total licenses, 129 late renewals. So that means about 23% of our licensees were late this year. And you can see by each month how many total late applications there were, where you see sort of the rise in the number is also consistent with the rise in that general time of how many people are renewing and up for renewal. So
Mirrors when we started, how we started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. So we break up our late renewal applications into late and complete versus late and incomplete. So all of these were late. The distinction of late and complete versus late and incomplete is when they got to the board meeting that was the last possible board meeting before a decision had to be made. So we had 129 late renewals last year. 95 of those, so 74%, were late and complete by the time it got to their board meeting. So they had submitted late, but were able to get everything complete prior to the meeting they needed to be approved at, meaning that 34 of them, or 26%, were still incomplete when they got to that board meeting and needed to request an extension.
I've seen every one of your memos on these late and complete, and you guys do a tremendous job just staying on people. I mean, you really make it so there's no excuse, as far as your communication. So.
Yeah, and if you think that all of the late and complete work happens right within the 30-day window,
Exactly.
leading to the board meeting, that's just exponentially more work, right? That you would spend with some other applicants or licensees.
Exactly.
Well, one thing that we've been talking about a little bit in the legislature, one thing that's been requested by us, by the constituents, is a one-time ability to change your licensing date. Mm-hmm. Is that something that we should explore? And we can talk about it offline because it's, but would that help? Because it seems like there's a crush in June, July, August, and September. And then there's kind of
I mean, I think there is, but you're seeing it as still a steady percentage of who's renewing at that point. Right. So I think, it could spread things out a bit, but I don't know that it would impact the percentage of what's happening.
I thought that request had more to do with the fact that folks have to renew their insurance, renew and then their banking fee or whatever.
Well, a lot of people don't want to renew right around tax season because then they're paying taxes and their renewal fees at the same season.
Or renew around harvest season when they're doing other things.
But
we do have a lot of people that say something about the harvesting and not having time to renew because of that.
That's the rationale that was brought to us, but it could serve dual purpose to help, spread out the licensing work more consistently throughout the year, but maybe it's not worth it.
Okay, so 2025 late renewal application totals, summary. This is side by side, late and complete, late and incomplete, and broken up by license type. We're still staying pretty consistent here in our percentages. Total of 80 cultivators were late. We have 359 cultivation licenses, so 22% of cultivators were late. 22% of manufacturers were late, 24% of retailers. There's a little discrepancy in the integrated, it's 100%, but that is because both of our integrateds were working with licensing to split up their license, and then 25% wholesalers. So we really are maintaining the 22 to 25% across all license types.
Is there any particular challenge that folks are having by license type? Like for cultivators, is there a particular challenge that they have that we should be looking at from a policy perspective to renew? Like,
there are no particular challenges that are specific to the license type. Everybody seems to have the same general issues as far as, it's a lot of times it's related to getting updated documentation.
Okay.
That's where a lot of it comes from.
A lot of personal issues too.
Yeah, when people are waiting until 15 days prior to their renewal deadline and then reaching out to the tax department to get their good standing and finding out that they are not in good standing and having to remedy that in order for us to be able to renew them, it's pushing things out.
And I mean, to Julie's point, if roughly 70% of a license type can do this in a manner that's not late, that means 30%. That means that 70% is being disadvantaged by the other 30%, because that 30% is not always being penalized for being late when the other 70% are doing what we're hopeful that they can accomplish. And that's really where this crux of fairness, as a community, as licensees, I think needs to be thought of a little bit more at the forefront here.
And this breaks it down even more into the tiers. So with the exception of indoor tier 4, which is 100%, but there's only one person, and indoor tier 5, which is 50% because there's only 2 total. Those are a bit of an outlier, but other than that, it's staying between 14 and 38% when you break it down by tier. The low end of that being mixed tier 3, and the high end of that being indoor tier 3. But again, I think that's going more into the numbers of totals that we have anyway, being smaller. But yeah, late and incomplete versus late and complete by tier.
Great.
Thank you.
So a comparison to prior year renewals. So late renewals in 2025 compared to what their status was at their previous renewal. So out of 129 late renewal applications, 37 of them had been initially issued in 2024. So there is no comparison to be made on if they were late or not. Out of the 129, 62 of them were also late in 2024. And 30 of them were not late in 2024, but were late in 2025.
So about half were late 2 years in a row.
Yep, exactly.
But half got better, so thank you to those.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, all set. So now looking at priority status. So we have the late and complete and late and incomplete straight numbers by priority status. Economic empowerment, 17 people were late. Social equity, 23 were late, and standard, 89 were late. And breaking that down into, if we're looking at the total late applications, 69% of them were standard applicants, 18% of them were social equity applicants, and 13% of them were economic empowerment applicants.
It's pretty consistent with
Yep,
our
yeah.
general distribution.
Mhm. And we can, and so this is looking at those priority statuses as a total compared to all licensees of that status. So economic empowerment licensees as a whole, 87% of them had on-time renewal applications last year. 13% of them were late. Of our social equity licensees, 73% of them had on-time renewal applications and 27% of them were late. And of our standard licensees, 75% of them had on-time renewal applications and 25% of them were late. So we're really keeping a consistent 25-ish% across every different way that you look at the numbers, whether it's by social equity status or tier. It's staying pretty consistent.
I think one more slide for you here.
Yep.
It's a very cool one.
Yeah, so this is looking at just the people who were late and incomplete by the time they got to the board meeting and therefore requested an extension. So we had 34 licensees who filed late applications that were incomplete by the time they got to the board meeting. We granted extensions for 28 of those 34. Out of those 28 that were given an extension, 25 of them became complete and were able to be approved at the following meeting that they were extended to.
Are some of those extensions, granted, everybody can start this process on the earlier side, but are some of those extensions for things that were beyond the licensees or the applicant's control?
I mean, I
Like
definitely
waiting on another agency to get back.
right. And I think more so than waiting on somebody to get back to them was more so being not in good standing and needing to get into good standing with a different department in order for us to move on. Though occasionally there was some people who were waiting on something like their insurance broker to get back to them with their updated documents.
Okay, thank you.
So out of the 28 people that got an extension, 3 of those people requested a second extension. One of those people we did not give a second extension to. They expired, their application expired, but they were able to get their license reinstated within 60 days. Two different people we did give a second extension to. Neither of them became complete by the end of their second extension. They both expired and neither of them reinstated. Of the 6 people that we did not grant an extension to, so this is later in the year, these people were late and incomplete, and we did not give them another extension. We didn't give them an extension to become complete. Out of those 6, 1 person has been reinstated so far. 5 have not been reinstated, but of those 5, 2 are still within their reinstatement window. And actually both of them are on this meeting for later to be reinstated. So really that sort of changes it to 3 and 3 of reinstatements versus not reinstated of the 6 that were not granted an extension.
I know one metric that's not captured here, but we've talked a little bit about in the past is the time when a license has been submitted and is with us versus when it's with the applicant because it's incomplete has been shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Essentially we're doing our part to, try and improve, our time with the application, our time reviewing applications.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
Licensing, I would say usually faster, but within 2 business days of a renewal being submitted, the licensee is getting that incomplete letter if there's something missing. When they get an incomplete letter and they resubmit with the documentation that we've requested, it almost always is reviewed same day as they resubmit, unless it happens to be the end of the day. But if it's not reviewed that same day that it's resubmitted, it's reviewed this next day. So
I was just looking at that basic statistic from Washington State, who's been around since 2016, and their average time from submission to licensure is 94 days. Just so you know.
So that is, all I've got. If you have no more questions, then
Thank you.
we're all set.
Thank you so
Great,
much,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I just think that 25% needs to come down in terms of how many are late. And I really don't want it to be because we're letting licenses expire. I really hope folks are looking at this information and planning more, pragmatically this year.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Well, I think we're now at the point where we are looking at the staff recommendations for licensure. So I have a few slides here. Try to go quickly. So first, you're looking at our staff recommendations for initial licensure. One wholesaler who is new to the cannabis market and an applicant for a manufacturer license who already holds a cultivation license and a retail license. And approval is recommended.
Is there a motion to approve? Are there any questions for Olga? No. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve the applicants as listed with the staff recommendation, subject to any contingencies.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. I have 3 slides for you here representing our timely regular renewals. So that's the first.
To Kyle's point, thank you all for your timely
Yes, thank you.
renewals. Appreciate it.
So second slide of timely renewals.
Okay.
And the last slide here. Yeah, approval is recommended for all 3 slides with names.
Herb Closet, that's not the one that expired, is it? No,
So
okay.
that's Vermont.
Vermont, sorry, yep, okay.
Very familiar.
Yes, yep,
Sounding
Okay.
nice in this.
all right, yeah, great. All right, is there a motion to approve the renewal application recommendations?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to approve the applications as listed.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, here's one business seeking to renew its retail license and also add a medical endorsement. And our licensing team recommends that the board approve issuance of the endorsed license.
Great. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve the requested renewal with the addition of the medical use endorsement.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next, we are looking at 2 licensees who wish to renew in a different tier. So both are asking the board to allow them to move their manufacturing operations from tier 2 to tier 1 to better reflect their operations and plans.
Great. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approve the renewals of applicants together with the requested tier changes.
I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So moving on here. So here we have 3 renewal applications that also include requests for ownership changes. The board has been provided a licensing memo that provides supplemental information for each. And to confirm, all proposed new owners have gone through the background check process and have also successfully completed affiliation forms. And our licensing team recommends approval for all 3.
Great. Any questions about these? No? Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve the 3 requested renewals together with authorization for the proposed ownership changes.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. So next one, here you're looking at a wholesaler who is interested in moving their operations from one part of their property to another. They're moving from 699 Pine Street to 701 Pine Street in Burlington. The local control commission approved that move in the middle of December this past year. This business has had a passing site visit from our compliance team and has met all administrative requirements. And our team recommends approval.
Is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board approve Apex Arboretum's request to amend its license to reflect the new operating location.
No, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Next, here you're looking at a business that is seeking to renew their license, their retail license, and also add a medical endorsement. The licensing team recommends that the board approve the timely renewal of this application, but also dismisses the licensee request for a medical endorsement. The board has been shared on the compliance materials related to this licensee in support of its recommendations. And of course, our staff is available for any questions about this licensee as it relates to their recommendations.
Any questions about this one?
I just wonder if it's appropriate to give like a high level, just so people understand the reasons that we dismiss versus accept.
Well, there is a compliance issue with this licensee, and they're currently under notice of violation, which means they're not in good standing for the purposes of being able to secure medical use.
We require 6 months of good standing, continuous good standing. And when does that start? When does the clock start on that 6 months? Is it from the violation or from
Settlement.
I think we're looking back.
I think it's a date of the notice of violation that when that was issued. So if 6 months goes by and
Okay.
they're in compliance 6 months after the notice has been issued, they could reapply.
Okay.
If that's how we.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? No. All right. Is there a motion to approve the renewal and dismiss the medical use endorsement for the time being?
I move that the board approve the requested license renewal, but dismiss the associated request to take up the medical use endorsement pending resolution of the open violation.
And I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, so here, 2 late but now complete renewal applications. The narratives for both have been shared with the board ahead of this meeting, and the licensing team recommends approvals in cases.
Great. Is there a motion to approve these late and complete? Or I guess we've seen the materials. Any questions for Melissa or Olga? Okay, is there a motion to approve?
I move that the board accept, sorry.
You got it.
I move that the board accept the now complete applications and adopt staff recommendations to approve them.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And the final slide here. So 2 expired retail licensees are presented here for you. They still fall within that 60-day redemption period permitted under Rule 115.2D. And the board has been shared on materials for both of these licensees. And by way of a quick summary, both have recently expired. Since they did not meet necessary requirements for a timely renewal, they have gone through the cessation of operations as directed by their compliance agents. And since their expiration, they both have successfully provided our licensing division missing documentation to qualify for reinstatement, which now our staff recommends that the board exercises its discretion, but the staff recommends that these licenses be reinstated. And when they are, their original dates will be used in perpetuity as long as they're licensed with us.
Great.
And if we do reinstate them, they have 60 days to be operational. Is that correct?
Is that true for both? Are they both
No,
open?
Only both are. Yeah, Vermont has never opened, so they would be given 60
Gotcha.
days to
Okay.
start the
they're-
operations.
But they're ready. They have their certificate of occupancy. They're all
Yes.
set to, as soon as they get approved, start making sales.
In terms of what's required for for permitting, for licensure, they have met those requirements.
Right.
And yes, we would expect them to open the doors in the next 60 days.
Great. Okay. Any other questions?
No.
All right. Is there a motion to reinstate these licenses?
I move that the board adopt staff recommendations to reinstate the 2 recently expired licenses listed, noting that the annual renewal dates will not be changed from those that applied before the licenses expired.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you for that. And that is all we got for you.
Well done, thank you.
All right. Great work, everyone. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 discussions about very discrete issues. We've been provided memos about each, and I think we should talk about them. And to the extent that they require board action, I'm hoping that we can just hold off on that until after our public comment period, which will be after we talk about all 4. I don't know, Olga or Gabe, if you want to walk us through them or if we just want to start chatting about them.
I can give you the nutshell just for.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Do you want to join us on the?
Yeah, to keep a low profile.
But people can't see you.
Voice for radio, face for radio. Okay, so this, this is one of several issues that staff wanted to bring to you just because it presents a policy question, and the appropriate place to have that discussion is, in an open meeting. And so in this case, the issue is the treatment of keef. The product registration staff encountered some registrants who are resistant to doing laboratory testing of keef as an additive. And similarly, some folks have asked that keef added pre-rolls not be treated as cannabis products, just be treated as cannabis. That has downstream implications for what kind of packaging is allowed, et cetera, et cetera. And so the question is, how should the product registration team treat keef? Historically, the team has allowed cultivators to add keef to pre-rolls as long as the tests remain under 30%. That has proven to be problematic in 2 ways. One is the effect it has on inventory tracking and lot separation, and the other is the possibility of undetected infusion. The law on this is really the definition of cannabis product that's found at Section 831, Sub 3 of Title 7. This is familiar to most people because it's the cause of infused pre-rolls being treated differently from regular pre-rolls. And the reason for that is that under that statute, the cannabis product means concentrated cannabis and a product that is composed of cannabis and other ingredients and is intended for consumption. So the question really is keef concentrated cannabis? Does it concentrate, does it increase the potency of the pre-roll? I think what's going on is that some of the people that are discussing this with the product registration team want to distinguish between modes or methods of concentration. They're saying this is not chemical concentration. It's just the physical addition of what is basically dust that fell off the plant. The statute notably doesn't make that distinction, though. It doesn't care whether it's chemical or mechanical concentration. And so that's sort of the question for you is, is keef added to a pre-roll a concentrated cannabis that makes it a cannabis product?
How is the potency accounted for now? So if you have a pre-roll that then has keef added to it, do you just add the numbers? How is it labeled now?
I don't know that it is.
Okay.
I think people will often label their pre-roll, keef infused or something.
Right.
And then the practice that was causing the PR folks trouble is using that 30% cutoff. There's some appeal to it because if it's under 30%, it can be treated as rare, or it matches in potency. But then they've got the problems that they were talking about with it in terms of people consumers not necessarily knowing.
Yeah.
And then the potential for undetected infusion and the difficulty and the potential to mix lots. because the keef can come from all over other than the plant to which it's added back.
Oftentimes, to get enough keef to make this like viable from a quantity perspective, like you're using like a dry sift tumbler, you're using a piece of machinery or a piece of manufacturing equipment in order to produce enough keef. It's not simply falling off the plant like you would see in a grinder if you're a consumer
Right.
at home. I don't want to say that's it for all cases, but
So, sorry if you already answered this, Gabe. I was distracted. I forgot to handle the relocation request.
Oh,
It's on the agenda. We skipped right over it. But if someone under the current law is adding keef from the same flower back to a pre-roll, when does that product get tested? When it's flower or the final product, the keef infused pre-roll?
I don't know the answer to that question entirely, but I know that for the PR team, the test that matters is the one of the post keef post keef edition. And to date, of course, they've been using that 30%. And they're, I think, looking to get away from that.
So whether the keef is coming from the flower or from a combination of flowers, the final infused pre-roll is being tested.
Yes.
And the problem that we're worried about is that keef is being sold as a commodity, trading hands, and
It's the source of the keef is unknown and it isn't individually tested as any other additive.
but it would be.
commingling keef from different harvest lots.
Yeah.
So
But you would be
therefore-
testing the final product regardless.
I believe so, yeah.
Should I ask Mike?
Yeah, Mike may have some more insight into.
Yeah, let me go see if he's around because.
yeah, I'm
Might be
curious
some new
if it matters, if it's from that cultivator also versus what you're saying, changing
Right.
hands, like selling my keef for you to add
Right.
manufacturer to a pre-roll that comes from somewhere else.
I mean, I think what we said is concentrated keef would be considered a manufactured product. If you were to sell pure keef puffs to someone else,
Yeah,
that would be, you would need a manufacturing license for that, or
it would be registered as a cannabis
Right.
product.
creating it. It'd be registered. You'd need a manufacturing license.
Yes.
To Kyle's point, I think the last time we talked about this, which was probably 2022 or 2023, right? We were thinking in much smaller terms. If somebody's creating, if they're using the byproduct keef, they're probably creating a lot. Like it's not in a sifter. It's not, you know what I mean? Like it's not a small amount.
Yeah, so I think that's the concern here is that most of the time, if under normal circumstances, I think this allowance was created because we were expecting, keef from the trimming process to be incorporated into the infused pre-rolls. I think what's happening is we're seeing a blurring of lines between keef and hash and like dry sifted hash. And it would be very hard for the product registration team to basically make that difference using the PR registration database. And it's very possible that keef is often refined, dry sifted, manufactured like a manufactured product without getting the testing that we would require on other dry sift hash products. It wouldn't be required to have a separate potency test, pathogen test, things that we normally require for those inputs.
But if the final product is tested, is the concern that this is an inversion concern?
It's not necessarily an inversion concern, but it's really hard for the PR team to track separate lots. So it'd be really easy for a cultivator to, over time, collect keef from various different process lots and combine it, sift it, add it to their infused pre-rolls, and it would be impossible for us to track that essentially. So I think that's the overarching concern, as well as you know, we're requiring that these pre-rolls are under 30%. It's very possible that in actuality, they're not under 30%.
But that's what I'm wondering is we wouldn't require testing of that infused pre-roll at the end of the process.
We would, yeah. So we're getting that one snapshot in time, so the final test does have to be on that infused pre-roll.
And has to be at the 30%. So they can test the pre-roll with the keef added to it.
Yeah.
So the consequence of us changing this, though, is these cultivators that want to use just a combination of keef that they've accumulated over multiple harvests would need to get a manufacturing license in order to do so.
Yeah, I would say that's the overarching consequence, is that they would have to work with a manufacturer to produce the products.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to both sides of this argument. We got to make things easy for our team here because we have a very lean team compared to almost every other state, and we don't have metric. But it seems like I know what you're saying too, Gabe, about the difference between cannabis product legally, statutorily. But it seems like that 30% also comes into play, which is cannabis flower capped at 30%, cannabis products concentrates capped at 60%. So it seems like if something, even if it's an infused pre-roll, is below 30%, it should be considered flower. If it's above 30%, it should be considered a product. Which is the current state of our rule, right?
Yeah, that is the status quo, I think. And the issue is just what Mike was talking about. It opens up possibilities for intermingling and addition of product that messes up tracking a little bit. But it's sort of a question of costs and benefits.
So a pre-roll with keef added is still cannabis. It's not a cannabis product, I'm sorry, I just lost the plot there.
So the line really is just in the THC percentage. So there are keef, infused pre-rolls that test above 30%. Cultivators want to market them as such, and those would be considered cannabis products.
It feels like it's probably creating some consumer confusion with, like, if we're saying flour is 30%, when you look at a pre-roll, I think most people think that's flour. Right. When I think of products, I think of concentrates and edibles and things like that.
In a world where thinking about what's in proposed language at the legislature right now, where that 30% number or the 60% number do disappear, how does that change this conversation? And would we be revisiting this in July if whether or not we do anything today?
Yeah, I mean, it might change the math. The relevant statute 831 sub 3 just asks, is there concentrated cannabis in it? And so, if you had 10% flower to which you added enough additional THC from whatever source, and you only got to 20%, you still have a cannabis product under that statute.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the statute doesn't, if you're reading it through a plain language lens, it might not be as forgiving or as sympathetic as I think you're alluding to.
So I mean, what the PR people are sort of saying is keef is always going to be over 30%,
right.
And that's why they think it should be treated as a product, and they think it would be best to call all pre-rolls with additives a product, and they, to them that's the cleanest way to separate additives from flour that doesn't contain additives.
Like, for example, we see occasionally distillate infused pre-rolls, and whether those are under or over 30%, they'd still be considered cannabis products because of the input, because of the manufacturing process associated.
Right. That's more cut and dry.
What matters most to me, I guess, in the big picture is that when people look at the product and the label that comes with it, that they have all the information they need to make a choice, right? It seems like perhaps what you proposed in separating this out is the most accurate way to label the product.
Yeah.
And I really don't think that infused pre-rolls, regardless of whether they're products or not, should be in child-resistant packaging, which probably requires a rule change. But frankly, maybe we could just have a waiver for that, because I just like the distinction, which was, I think, too challenging for the legislature to really understand, was whether it's been decarboxylated or not. So whether we require the manufacturing license or not, I think, it's a little bit tough. But I also think that we should have a rule change or waiver that says that infused pre-rolls, whether it's with distillate or keef, don't require child-resistant packaging.
If the product or the input isn't decarboxylated.
Right.
Because if you had distillate, you could have an issue.
Distillate is activated?
Yeah.
All right. So then.
You would
Just
have to
keef.
really drill into what it's infused with there.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that too complicated for PR?
It could increase the workload in terms of, requiring everyone to go through the waiver process. It wouldn't be a huge, barrier for us. I think we could work with that.
Are they now in childproof? No.
No, if they're infused with keef and they're under 30%, they're not resistant.
Okay.
And I don't know if it's waivable because it's statutory. So you would want to ask the General Assembly to change the product definition if you want the distinction to turn on. Or actually, I wouldn't recommend changing the definition of product. I would recommend asking them to change the child resistance to be sensitive to decarboxylated or not.
Mm.
Okay.
That probably makes more sense in the long run anyway.
Yeah.
They have vape carts now.
If you want to charge, you'll
Right.
Yeah, I got
Right.
that legendary HP battery.
Yeah, you should charge mine's full.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this is one of 5 issues. And again, we're going to pause before we make any big decisions. Do you want to hear the next one, or do we want to go back to the retail relocation requests?
Mike is here, and there is another one I
Okay.
think that's compliance related, so
All
we
right.
might as well.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah. Can you walk us through, is it the pathogen testing requirements?
Yeah, so the overarching question regarding that one is whether or not a cultivator who doesn't also have a manufacturing license can skip a pathogen test if their entire lot is going to be extracted, essentially, particularly for solventless based extraction, which would require a pathogen test at the final product level. The compliance team's recommendation is that we don't allow for this exception. There are a number of concerns that we have if we were to allow that. One, it opens up a risk and a liability for any employees of a manufacturing facility who are handling potentially contaminated product. It also opens up liability for the equipment that they're using. Part of the waiver we saw talked about an agreement with the manufacturer, and it essentially puts any, downstream liability back to the cultivator if products are contaminated. Regardless, I think it opens up a door that we don't really need to or want to open. And we're putting manufacturers at risk, and we're also putting employees of those facilities at risk if we're going to allow for this testing exception.
So it wouldn't be all extraction methods, right? I mean, it would just be the ones that have kind of a kill step in them.
Well, it would be the ones that don't really have a kill step. So like the solventless based extraction, like if someone is making a rosin, essentially, they're taking that cannabis, they're not doing the pathogen test in this scenario, they're passing all their material to the manufacturer, and they're making the hash and then pressing the rosin. And there's still potential for pathogen contamination at that time. So they would be required to test the final product for pathogens, which was what the waiver was submitted. But there's still a potential through that process for equipment to become contaminated, for handling of that material that could have negative impacts on employees.
Julie, I'm trying to think back to 2022. We had VOSHA come in at some point to talk to us.
We had Project WorkSafe come and talk to us about their program, and that they talked about how people can have Project WorkSafe come to their facility and look for risks.
Yeah.
And identify them, and then you have to fix them, but it's a preventive measure. I don't know that would really, I don't know that would address this. That would be more like,
Right.
Lifting and tripping and, tag out and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Well, lockout, tag out, that kind of stuff. I don't know that they would know how to identify, whether or not a piece of machinery is contaminated.
Do we know if VOSHA proactively is looking for occupational risks at cannabis manufacturing?
They are, but their thresholds for having jurisdiction over any business, kind of excludes a lot of our existing businesses. So
there is also concern that this just creates an opportunity where not necessarily the business that submitted this waiver, but in the future, this could promote unsanitary practices at a cultivation facility. And, if they're not looking and worried about pathogens, like how confident should we feel in their good, SOPs and so on and so forth. I think, what I don't want to do is minimize the fact that testing is costly. And I can appreciate how this feels duplicative if things go absolutely right for this person instead of one of these things that we're concerned about happens, I think, and it doesn't solve the problem today, but I'm looking at our lab that's hopefully coming online in the next couple months. I'm looking at some of the money we're hopeful to get testing through the Cannabis Business Development Fund, and can we utilize some of those in the future to relieve costs of testing for situations like this versus just opening a door that I'm not sure where, that is in line with consumer safety of a product and worker safety, and whatever the liability might be for a manufacturer who takes this on. And yes, there's these agreements, but it's going to shut down your manufacturing facility while you remediate your equipment.
Yeah, I mean, this one to me, we require the labeling of aspergillus to carry forward for this exact reason. It's not, to me, because we require end product testing here, it's not a huge consumer risk, but the employee risk is pretty real, seems like.
It also seems like, from a consumer safety standpoint, if we had to investigate a product, it would be much more difficult to figure out where the problem started.
We've seen some of that already.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have any more questions on this one.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Are there any other ones that, Mike, you want to help us out with? Adult use products and medical dispensaries? I don't think.
I did.
No. I'm looking at these.
That one's more statutory, and I think probably one of the least complicated.
Okay.
The question has presented itself as it inevitably would. Now that we have these distinct registration categories for adult use products and medical use products, the latter defined as things that aren't lawful for sale in the adult use system but are registrable if you're in the medical system. The question is just, can a dispensary, an old school dispensary, the proper medical dispensary, sell adult use registered products? I've given you a memo that kind of walks through, the reasoning and the way we got here. But the short answer, in my opinion, is there's no statutory impediment to it. And amendments that were made to Section 973 when the systems were integrated do expressly contemplate that dispensary would purchase cannabis and cannabis products from a Chapter 33 cannabis establishment. So with that, there's not. This one seems tilted that way. I don't.
Yeah. How many dispensaries, medical dispensaries are there? 2, 3?
Three locations.
And so if you agree with that principle, that nobody should be shocked to see conventional adult use products in a medical dispensary, the next question you have to ask is whether the restrictions that were written really for endorsed retailers that say you've got to segregate the products very carefully so that consumers can tell the difference, and you've got to keep the medical stuff undercover, apply in this circumstance. And I think it may bear consideration that Section 881A5G3, which talks about segregation, talks specifically about endorsed retailers. And then your Rule 374, which talks about the products being behind the counter and undercover, also talks specifically about a retail cannabis establishment with a medical endorsement, which a dispensary is not. And so I think if I mention that because I think that choosing the subject narrowly is an indication that when those two things were drafted, people were thinking about retailers and not dispensaries. And so so the question is, do you see a compelling reason to apply the separation rule and the cover rule in a context where it's all people that are patients?
No, the cover rule I won't talk about the statute because it's legislative, but for me, the cover rule, we talked about this at length during our rulemaking. We're not trying to incentivize adult use customers to go out and purchase medical products. It was really like the medical program per legislative intent is intended for the people that qualify for it, not for, people that just want higher potency products. And so when we discussed it, said, no, these shouldn't even be on display at adult use retailers. But when you're talking about in the context of a dispensary, the only customers that are going in there are people with medical cards. So I don't have any problem waiving that or not applying the segregation inside a dispensary.
It is still true, right? They have to have a medical card to go in a medical dispensary.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really, there's no waiver involved so much as the question is the staff correctly construing the law and rule by saying, yes, it's okay to sell adult use in a medical dispensary, and no, those two separation rules don't apply in that context.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
All right. That was
the easiest one.
They should all be like
LCCC guidance. It seems pretty straightforward to me.
Oh,
Thanks,
I need
Mike.
to look at this
Thanks,
again.
Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Should talk about related,
The new and related.
newly related matter, maybe quickly.
Yeah. So that one is the can a medically endorsed retailer advertise, or I guess anyone advertise medical products to the general adult population as long as it's compliant with other advertising restrictions.
Should just discuss
Yeah,
that.
and the complication there, as the memo explains, is that Section 978, which applies to advertising by dispensaries, contains the same restriction that is contained in the parallel statute that applies to advertising by adult use establishments, that the advertising can't represent that cannabis has curative effects. If you apply that literally, it would mean that adult use cannabis or the medical use cannabis products can't really be advertised to the general public, kind of period. The question then becomes, I think that most of the if assuming the First Amendment would apply, and then assuming that Article 13 would be construed in parallel to the jurisprudence on the First Amendment, you would need some allowance for a truthful, non-misleading menu, plain text menu of what do we have. Otherwise, how on earth would people even know to find it? I think you see similar things like that in the pharmacy world. So it's really a question for you guys about what are the permissible bounds of advertising medical products if they may be advertised, in the general media at all.
I have no problem with them being advertised to medical patients. That's the segregated and undercover application of that. I don't think that they should be advertised to non-medical patients.
How do you, wait, I have a question first. Can the medical dispensaries advertise as long as they follow all the other rules of advertising?
I don't know that they can advertise their existence as a business. I don't know they can advertise products, and I don't know that any do.
Yeah, I guess my question, yeah, I mean, if the medical dispensaries can advertise products, then there should be parity, right? But I guess I'm not clear on that. I know they don't
I don't think
necessarily
and
because
I
they're so
don't really
few,
know the reason. I mean, the reason could be long ago DPS construed this the same way we're talking about and said no, to put it out
Right.
as a medical product is to imply it has curative
Well, I've said it
effects.
out loud, so they probably will now, but
Well,
but if there should be parity, I guess, right?
Fine
If
with
that's the
parity,
case, but.
I think in both instances, if you have a list of medical patients that have opted into receiving advertising, I feel like that, as long as you're complying with the other aspects of the statute and rule, you should be allowed to advertise theoretically products to them. I mean,
Does that mean you have to keep two separate customer lists?
yeah, but you should probably be doing that anyway because you're tracking the sales differently.
But you're not, are you tracking the sales? You're tracking the quantity of sales, but you're not sort of tracking it to their email address, for example.
Well, I think
I don't know.
you have to opt into these mass marketing emails, right?
yeah, concepts.
Opt into the medical one or not.
And so I think the proposals that we're seeing look like, I'm a retailer, I have a list that goes out weekly, mass marketing list. I just want to put these products in there right next to the adult use ones. But, in each case, label a medical product. And I think that sometimes carrying the implication that a uniquely strong product is curative or medicinal in a way that a weaker product isn't.
Yeah, I think Pepper addressed all of that, right? That it's too broad.
Any more discussion on this one? I don't mean to wrap it up. I'll debate this all day, but I'm more curious if we want to go back and do the retail relocation or if we want to do public comment next on these.
I think you go either way.
Why don't we do retail relocation?
And we have LCC guidance.
Oh, LCC.
Yeah.
All right, never
Whatever
mind.
order
I'm
you-
confused. Yeah. All right. Why don't we do LCC first? Well,
It was nearly 80 degrees in here, so it's, I mean,
This tweed jacket's a little.
it's not.
any other questions about the advertising medical products for Gabe or discussion about it?
I have a general question about these issues. Are we going to consensus? Are we going to vote on them? How are we deciding? How are we giving the staff the direction?
What would you prefer?
Some clear instruction, I guess, could be a voted motion.
Okay.
Probably.
That's probably the clearest, right? Okay.
All right. LCC guidance. What do we have there? I didn't see any markup on it, but maybe
There is.
Yeah, there's markup on page 3. It's pretty small.
you want to pull it up? Sure.
Can I borrow that?
Sorry.
Okay, so it's a pretty minor change that would be meant to just sort of clarify things and keep our advice to our local partners match to current policy. And everything that would be added, you see right there in red. I'll try to merge these so that they. Anyhow, there you can see what would be added. The most important thing for the local commissions to understand is that we no longer send them an annual thing to fill out at renewal, at the annual renewal, because it confused many, and they often got the impression that if there's a problem, you wait all year and then you say there's a non-renewal. So instead, it reminds folks, we're going to assume the coast is clear until notified otherwise. The municipality, I think, has authority to decide the schedule on which it revisits these things. It doesn't have to do it annually. Many will choose to, issue it once and then only come back to it if there's a problem. I think it's a lot more efficient for many of them. And so this is just about cutting down paperwork and confusion. But this would change the guidance to let them know that that's what's going on.
Okay. So
sorry.
No real impact to the licensees. In fact, less impact to them.
Might prevent confusion and make renewal a little easier because you don't have that. But it is important that the local commissions know about it. So that's why it's in here. And the message is not, we don't care what's going on there. It's, we want to know when it happens, not have everybody wait a year.
And is this consistent with the way they handle other licenses? Like liquor licenses? Like I remember approving those every year when I was on the select board, but I don't know if that was just our town policy or not.
I don't really know. I mean, a town oversees a lot of things like that, sort of. So this is sort of its own creature, but this would be a system that says, let us know when there's an issue and eliminate that kind of misunderstanding.
Okay. Well, why don't we pause for public comment on these issues, and then after that, we can decide on them and then go back to the relocation. So this is the public comment period that we added just because these are complex issues, and I know some people feel strongly about them. If there are any public comments about the kind of 5 issues we just discussed or anything else, feel free to raise your virtual hand, and we'll then move to people that join by phone. Scott, I see your hand up first.
Hi, it's Scott Sparks with Vermont Bud Barn. Just a few comments. It would be great to have access to that PowerPoint we saw earlier on all the retail data. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but it would be great if we could search it out ourselves as opposed to trying to watch it through a recording on YouTube. And I may have misheard Mackenzie, but I believe she said something to the effect of there was a very, very small, like 1 or 2 percentage points, people going out of state to purchase cannabis. And again, I apologize if I heard her wrong, but being within the 10 miles of the Massachusetts border, I have to strongly disagree with that. We have lost a ton of business to Massachusetts where you can purchase cannabis for what we pay wholesale. And then it would be great if there was a way, as a dispensary that has a medical endorsement now, it would be great to see how the medical cards are distributed geographically in the state. I don't know if that data is available, but it would be very helpful data. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Melissa's here listening, and so we'll see what we can do. And certainly on the first point, we can post that PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
Anyone else with the public comment on any of the 5 kind of policy issues we discussed or anything else? Tito?
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Hey, so yeah, that first report, it was, super interesting. I mean, it was telling us what we already knew, and we're losing a lot of money to the black market. And the fact that over 70% of them are going to the black market because it's cheaper, it just shows how simple it is, and we need to keep lowering the regulatory burden, and just in general, just in whatever decisions you guys are faced with, to just always choose the option that's gonna make things easier, and definitely and to not control us for the sake of controlling, but to make business easier, flow better, so that we can meet the black market in pricing. Thank you all. Oh, and also please, if we could work to shorten that 10-day registration average, that would be incredible. Thank you so much. Hopefully everybody's having a great day. Bye.
Yep, thanks, Tito. Anyone else? And if you join by phone and would like to comment, it's *6 to unmute. Okay, I will close the public comment window. And let's see. Do you want to just deal with these one at a time?
Yep.
I think the easiest, why don't we just start with the easiest? The pathogen testing requirements. I think we just need to leave things the way they are for now. We can look into alternatives to it. I think we all recognize that testing costs are extreme, especially disproportionately impacting smaller cultivators. I think we've discussed ways that might be beneficial, including in our report, of subsidizing testing costs or using.
I think I didn't mean to cut you off. I think there's ways that we can hopefully in the future be helpful there without completely opening that door.
Yeah, I think we've seen 2 deaths at manufacturing facilities across the country, and no one really knows what's causing that.
Happen in Vermont, if we can avoid it.
And if VOSHA is not at a lot of our places, maybe we should be thinking about PPE for manufacturers. But in the meantime, I think we need to have a response.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't set rules I don't know what VOSHA would enforce.
Yeah, this is one of those areas where we can't necessarily rely on the existing infrastructure that deals with every other industry but ours. Yep. Okay, so do we need a vote on that we're going to leave things as is?
Only if you want.
No, I think on that one, because we're not changing anything. The LCC guidance, should we vote to adopt the changes unless there's a decision not to?
I don't have any problem with the changes.
I don't have any problem with the changes, but I wonder if we could work together to just communicate with the LCT so that they can communicate the change out to their members.
Yes, we could send that.
Yeah.
Could we, just remembering some recent changes that caused a stir, could we post them with a delayed effective date? Is that okay? So we could get more comment?
I want to say yes, but this has been our policy for a year.
I know.
We're just providing a current and accurate reference to the town clerk.
This isn't really a big policy change, so.
I think it might be different than how they handle other licenses, but I have no idea if the towns care. I don't know. I don't know if that's a big deal or not. I think what was most important is that we communicate with the league and get it out to their members.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, to us, it's important to have a current statement of what's going on for the clerks to refer to.
Yeah.
And they're awesome. I think don't all of them understand it.
All the clerks are awesome.
Okay. Well, I'd take a motion to accept the changes presented to us in the meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
To the LCC guidance that was implied, everyone? Yep. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The adult use products at medical dispensaries, do they need to be segregated and undercover? My opinion is no.
No.
Okay. So then do you want us?
As long as you affirm the staff interpretation, which is what we talked about, that yes, they're allowed there, and no, they don't have to adhere to those 2 separation rules.
Yep.
Okay.
So affirmed.
Affirmed, yes. Okay, the advertising of medical products to essentially adult use consumers. this, I mean, to me, just cuts against exactly why we put them in rule, put them undercover at these medical and use.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't, but that's okay because the two of you do.
Well,
That's two. That's the majority.
Democracy.
I think it's more complex. Like I really do. I think how do you tell the folks in the community that you have these products if you can't use the systems that you already have in place? I just think it's more complex.
if you're marketing, I just feel like if you're marketing to medical patients that are registered, it's a slightly different story in my book. I mean, I know that, maybe not under the analysis that Gabe gave us, but and maybe this requires statutory change. But to me, I just feel like we anticipated this problem within the medical use endorsed dispensaries themselves, not necessarily in advertising.
Yeah.
We were all kind of on the same page when it came to just segregation, put them undercover. So you're not enticing adult use consumers to go out and purchase them. I think that same rationale applies to advertising.
Yeah, I see that argument. At the same time, I'm not sure how we don't, like, the list of people who are medical patients is not open. We wouldn't want it to be. So I don't know how folks let patients know, people that we have designated or have applied for this and have met the criteria, know where in their community to buy certain things. So it's okay if we disagree. That's allowed, but I'm not sure. I think it's more complex than we've covered today.
It certainly is. Yeah. I will agree with that, but I think advertising is a very complex issue, even on the adult use side.
Mm-hmm.
And it may get a lot easier after this year. We'll see in the legislature. But I think one thing that we've allowed are people to kind of opt into these mass emails. And I think if patients have to show their ID card when they're buying a medical product, they could just as easily opt in to receive emails about medical products.
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like operationally though, right? Like, I don't know what that means in terms of how you manage those two lists. And I don't know enough about what that means on the other end to fully understand what we're asking for. But that's okay.
Advertising higher potency products to everybody on your mass marketing, it feels like that's so overly broad in terms of the finite number of folks that could actually purchase those products. Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of, I believe, confusion as to what products an adult use customer can purchase at that facility.
I agree. I think that's why I think it's just more complex than we've covered today. But that's okay.
Okay.
All right. So, do you want a motion on this? Yep. Okay. So the motion would be can you help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the rationale is twofold. It's, to adopt the rationale or to adopt the understanding that prohibition of claims applicable to all cannabis products makes these public advertisement of medical products for medical purposes, so it is effectively prohibited.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No.
And then the Keef infused pre-rolls. I mean, I generally just want to do what Mike tells me. I mean, they don't bring problems to us unless it's an actual problem. But on the flip side, I just feel like really, if the product's tested and the potency is accurate, if I just feel like that dividing line that was created by the legislature is 30% for flower, 60% for concentrates, just seems like how you get to that. I mean, using Keef to get to that 30, it's just, I don't know.
Well, I think the concern is that using keef to get above 30. Right? That's the issue.
If it's above 30, I think it's definitely a concentrate.
Well, that is the question that we're talking, that is the crux of this, yes?
Yeah, but it's a cannabis product. As soon as keef is involved, I think that's Mike's point.
Well, I understand the keef is above 30, but
Once it's added in, it's just, that's what.
well,
Mike
that,
was like.
I mean, to me, that's an easy decision. If it's above 30, I thought it was just the commingling of various keef, like keef from
Blending
multiple,
keef, yeah.
blending keef, and then adding it back in.
All of that. Plus, it is, we're talking seed to sale, right? And we really want to get there.
So I think I think we're all losing some brain power after doing this for 3 hours. Right now, if it's under 30, you're allowed to register it as a flower. I don't want to say product, but I think this would this proposal from compliance disallow the blending of keef regardless. So that pathway would only be open if you can verify that keef came from that specific harvest lot that you're trying to infuse the joint with.
In addition to the potency, though, that the other compelling part to me is the transfer of the, I don't know, it's not an intermediary, maybe it is, I don't know, the cannabis product, the keef, from place to place without being tested. That to me is from a health and safety standpoint, is a concern.
I'm inclined to go with Mike's proposal, but I think the more that we hear about blending, whether it's flower, keef, or otherwise, like it might warrant how can we work with the PR team and business to kind of understand where we can meet some of these issues in the middle.
Is this pressing?
We have a waiver request right now from somebody, and it's been, I think, with us for over a month. I'm not sure how urgent this is to the requester. We could probably, I mean, it's a one waiver. So,
But that waiver is not coming with a finished product.
no, actually, it might not be. I should probably ask Mike to talk
sorry.
about that. I don't want to come up with something on the fly.
Sorry.
But in terms of how pressing it is, you're wondering if we could bench that until some later time.
Can we bench it for 1 month?
It's like you knew we were talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was no waiver with this one. It was just a pathogen one. We can continue to talk about it. It's not a pressing matter. We're happy to continue the conversations.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I wouldn't mind just sitting down and, we can do it individually just because we won't be in an open meeting, but just really understand what the consequence is to the cultivation community.
Yeah, totally. Totally have to do that.
All right, awesome. Okay, so we're going to table this one. Status quo for this for now. That's the one person. Oh, I guess there is no one person. There's just status quo for now. All right. Thanks, Mike. The relocation request, we got some good information from the requester. I think Johnson has 2. This would bring it down to 1. Jeffersonville has 1. It would bring it up to 2, but they're within like.
Jeffersonville didn't have a Cambridge.
Oh, Cambridge has 1.
Cambridge is like the little it's surrounded by Jeffersonville.
And these to me are essentially within the same catchment area regardless. It just feels like.
Yes.
Yeah, but they can, the way that I interpreted the information we received, it also could bring in another retail establishment to there's a lot of communities around the Jeffersonville, Cambridge area that don't have any cannabis establishments. So moving it further west might bring in some more.
Interesting.
I think I have that right. Might bring in some communities, give an option to communities that would otherwise be saddled with one or going to Essex or Milton.
Okay.
Somewhere further.
Oh, so expanding the catchment area.
Reducing density in a.
And
reducing
expanding.
density in a. Now I'm confusing everybody, aren't I?
Oh, I opened the wrong document.
I remember when I was reading their rationale, I agreed with it. I will tell you that much.
Yes.
I do as well.
Okay. Great. So then, is there a motion to approve the retail relocation request of Clean Cannabis Dispensary from the current location in Johnson to the proposed location in Jeffersonville?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Oh.